So I thought I'll prepare a good streaming setup because I'm still just running off of a cheap ass webcam and this headset. And now that we're doing this fairly regularly, I went into that. I hit that tremendous decision
Decision.
paralysis of the consumer market. And I like, how are people on an average satisfied with such below average quality of things?
And paying
And
so
how,
hard.
and paying so high?
Yeah. Which is
And I
why,
was like, no, this deserves a broader, very calibrated setup. It's not something that you just go pick off the shelf. Who's that?
do you see what it is?
I can't see an image clearly.
Oh
Is that a
no.
pie board?
Yes, this is Raspberry Pi Zero, and also
Ah,
have the camera modules.
hmm,
Um, and this is not, again, just to go, like, to dig a little bit more into the topic that you mentioned, right? Consumer hardware is in such a shit place for multiple different reasons. We can actually go into that. I was thinking about talking tech a little bit this time, like today, right? So, okay, how far back do I start? Let's just go from here, and I'll go
I,
backward.
I would like to follow that trajectory
Hmm,
alongside the maker, like the hacker, maker, creator,
right.
DIY alternative space
Hmm.
that exists. But the tech, as opposed to, when we say tech, we often always mean consumer tech. And why is that so? How did that come to being? And where I'm not talking of a historically accurate representation. I feel like within our lifetimes, our subjective experiences have seen that happen. And just connecting that back to what we keep on saying, that we start off something, then the popular culture catches up, then we realize it's time to move ahead. But this did not happen with, there is still like that part is pending, like where popular culture catches up to the hacker mindset or the
The
maker
part
mindset.
that is like the assumption that is incorrect there is that you are assuming you are doing that atmavat for parabhuteshu. You are assuming everybody else is like you. That same mistake that I made multiple times. Unless you are part of the herd, you cannot assume that. That is not true. And
Yep.
it's not I'm trying to make a sense of exclusivity or like sitting on a high horse. I actively tried, and the breaker space is an effort to try that. I hit a dead end and tried to make it more palatable. Part is like people are inherently motivated by convenience, things that makes things easier. And if you boil everything down, it comes down to the point where companies are charging because they're making things like taking the pain of your head, not pain of your work or other aspect, pain of your head, because thinking is costly process. As long as you don't have to do that, people are okay to pay more money. I'll just pay more to get better done. So, oh, you are not happy with this Logitech's C2 920 camera? Get this whatever the next, like this 4K camera. This will solve your problem. The challenge is not there. The part that people do, and probably charge $36,000 rupees for that. Practically, like that's the reality, right? If anybody wants, and if that's not good enough for you, go buy a Sony Alpha mirrorless, and then the 1 lakh plus, like the your laptop and your camera basically becomes like, oh, the price wise becomes the same factor. So the thing is, and people are okay with it, because what is the alternative? You have to see it in two levels, right? One level is that some people are maker minded, and like the exact indecision that you're having, you would go ahead and do something that is cheaper, more effective, and but the availability of the parts and stuff and the documents and the like prior art, like somebody else done that, made a video, that is so low, or that applies on Indian markets is so low, is that it's not approachable. So that is where, because India hasn't really built up, like it's trying right now, it's trying to go into that hardware territory, the assembly line, etc., the entire um, part that is not software anymore, that part, right? So it's trying to go that direction, but I think it's a little bit later than it needed to be. I don't know how fast we'll catch up, but this ecosystem needs like 10-15 years to actually build its, like set its root. That same thing that happened with China, it didn't become the hub for these kind of things overnight. It took like almost like good 15 years and a very rampant effort in trying to make it so, right? So this was like, so this doesn't happen out of the blue. We haven't even taken the first step. Like we're basically starting, we're planning that we should do that. So it is gonna take some time. It's gonna take a while. And when that does happen, the challenge would be how do we see the the implication of capitalism versus local market, the tug of war between those two, like free market versus like closed market. Do we want companies that has made something, made a progress, to continue living off of that IP, or do you want no IP whatsoever, make the best product possible as cheapest rate possible, and make money because if your product is good, and if it is bad, you go out of business, right? That's the model. That second model is the one that China used. It's still, they're still using it, they're still making money out of it. Like, so that's what gives the like very cutthroat approach to competition and makes things happen very fast. Otherwise, what happens, like the entire Western IP based model, is that if somebody makes something, you are not entering that market whatsoever, and you're keeping on paying the royalty to those people. The same thing that happened with the reason there's no absolute zero innovation in the water cooling, PC water cooling market. You know why? Because it's one company that makes that IP, and nobody else is allowed to make any changes to that entire concept, and they have to pay Acetec for that, implementing any of the water cooling blocks. So if we go by that model, we are cutting off innovation of at any level. So basically, you can do it for yourself after climbing a steep climb. You can make it for yourself. The moment you try to commercialize it, no, sir, you cannot do it. You'll get a lawsuit. So then, what's the motivation for you to do it? Unless it's internal. I just want my camera to be the way I want. That's the only motivation you're driving off of. That's not a good, very good motivation for many or most people, or people who have other things to do in their life as well. This can be a good weekend project, but if that is like a high hill to climb and then there's no end to it, it's not a very nice experience, right? That's where I was trying to get to, right?
And you did bring up some of the pertinent issues here. And my initial question was like in kind of intentional, drafted in that format of that podcast host who asks a very basic question. And uh, well, not a host here, but um,
Now you are, and that is a good setup.
yeah. But I'm glad you kind of touched across a very important point, which is intellectual property rights. And um, how capitalism controls intellectual property rights, and how these two concepts kind of help each other. Basically, intellectual property right as a tool of monopolism or duopolism. And often, duopolism is used in certain contexts to justify the lack of a monopoly. That look, we have done better than give you only an Android or only an iPhone. Now you have an Android or an iPhone. But in the process, like what the answer to what kind of a market force should drive this is worth, I don't know, not just a lecture series. It's basically policy level discussion. So it's something that needs attention. So I don't want to half-ass it, but I just want to highlight like some of the key points I agree on is that intellectual property right as a blocker to innovation, the patent system, and the royalty derived from that, the rent-seeking behavior, so to say, of this capitalist order,
Absolutely.
um, is something that in these contexts acts as a blocker. Now, one question that comes up is why did then those countries which have succeeded in establishing this system and has gotten results out of it, like the Western European markets, the Northern American markets, uh, they have incentivized some of these actions. And one of the key thing is that the lack of variables in those societies, the lack of different thoughts, they are not melting pots, they are becoming melting pots now. Like the North American uh, if you look at the influx of citizenry that has happened over the years, we happen to be in a land where that has happened over millennia, and we are kind of in the future in terms of that cultural heterogeneity. So we are facing problems that these countries are going to face sooner or later as more diversity climbs in, and you see that okay, power is truly accumulated in very specific early movers, and this is also why the early mover advantage is so oversold even in the startup world, that eventually it's a matter of for a place like India to, I mean, so basically, when I said the maker mindset, I did not mean at an individual level. I meant the whole system, the society, the nation state in its policies has to emulate that. And one of the related things that I'm seeing at least happen in EU is the concept of repairability, which is one small step towards this goal. That as you improve repairability, what's going to happen is these companies have sold more devices that they can actually repair,
Hmm.
which means they have to open it up into third party ecosystems, which means at that point there is a policy intervention possible.
Yes. Yeah. So nice questions. You have asked many questions than I have. So I don't have answers, complete answers to some of those questions. But some of those questions I have given good thoughts about. Like part of the
Mhm.
process is that rent seeking behavior, right? Why does that happen? And how do you get a grip on it, for a lack of a better other uh, phrasing? So as
And
it,
I
yeah,
wanted to also highlight convenience
yeah,
as the thing that you brought in, right? uh, I mean, yeah, that question was from a model high horse, because for me, I decided to let go of that convenience because the current work that I'm doing, this stream does not really demand it of me. If I choose to improve it, it's on me. It will feel better if it improves. But just switch this context. Even 4 months back, when I was doing sessions and all, I kept on pushing off doing video sessions or remote sessions because I did not have good streaming setup, and I chose to let go of that convenience. I decided to work against it. This just being one example. So convenience as a factor, and convenience being that bait and a trope um, in current day consumer technology.
yeah,
While that's a goal, I think one thing I'd like it to also dissect is where does that become a bait, and where does innovation stop as a result of that.
perfect. So as you identified, there is a there is a just right moment for pretty much anything and everything, any virtue or any vice. There still is a just right moment for convenience as well. I'll come back to it. Let me just touch on the part that I started talking about, that rent seeking behavior part, right? Because that's the part I have given most thought about in this particular thing. So those policies around IP rights were created in the last century, not even last decade or the decades of last century. Part of the world, it was around the time when people were still considering bloodletting and those what do you call it, that the needle that goes through your eyes and pinches your brain. Those kind of they were considered medical practices during those time. These laws and regulations were made, so it's that old, right? The world has gone through at least two or three orders of magnitude faster, like in a iterative process. If you allow that slow of a process to still take a toll on innovation, it will stall. And then somebody will find a crack in that model, and then it'll break apart like a floodgate, right? And this creates a very unstable situation that creates a lot of like things going out of business. So there's no smooth flow of from here to there that we are creating. And again, the second order, the reason that doesn't happen, I'll come to that from a policymaker standpoint. Why the game is set up that way. I'll go to get to that. But to identify, so there is no way that the game is being played where there is a smooth way to transition from using the IP rights. Like there has to be some as in benefit for innovating something, but yet not so much that it stalls everybody else's innovation, right? How do you like employ that? When it was done back in that time, whatever the time limit they said, 50 years or 20 years or 10 years, whatever that time limit is for whatever kind of IP, probably they did it right. Probably even they set it low. But the point is, right now, that time limit is eras pass essentially. You go from one era to another era and jump across another one to get any IP basically go out of fashion, as in its time limit expiry date. That is not good. So that if we challenge that, if we address that, if we make that adjustment on a continuous basis, if we can somehow have a factor that says, okay, if you innovated something on 2020, it has a lifespan of this many years or this many months. If you do that on 2025 and it actually follows that exponential curve of growth, you can, it's not even that difficult to build upon essentially, because you can follow the exponential curve and let's say take the GDP or some other of the any of those second order like factors as your guideline. People can do better, like if you put some more thoughts in, not that difficult, and you can utilize that to make how small or long that time limit needs to be, which makes it so you can sell it for one season by your technology. Valve comes with Steam Deck, makes that entire handheld gaming thing a reality, and a PC and all those things. It sells for a one Christmas, and by March that goes out. Now everybody else can make their own version. Valve didn't. That's why it's happening. That's why now you're seeing Asus coming up with Asus ROG and Lenovo coming up with their own shit. So point is, because somebody did not enforce a legal protection around their what they brought out, that's why that innovation is happening. If they did that, that does not happen. You are stuck with that Valve Steam Deck. With that aside, now that we established the time factor, the other factor is that why is it not happening then? Do people not realize? Yes, they do. But from the policymakers' perspective, what benefit do they have for the most part? Because I'm not looking at EU for the most part. EU is very small, from a consumer's perspective, very small area or domain. They're doing great work. Again, I'll come back to that. But they're doing great work. I have some criticism for that as well. But point is, overall, they're doing great work, and I wish they continue to do that. Okay, continue to do that. Meanwhile, for any of the tech example of India, policymakers in India, what benefit do they have trying to do that? Because they're extracting more money out of the corporations that are big and they can make more money keeping the status quo the same way. They don't win anything, they don't gain anything by doing that extra work unless they have some kind of ultimate objective that is internally posed. Like, we need to make our country better, we need to get somewhere. Most of the people are playing their own selfish game, right? In that case, you don't get anywhere until somebody breaks up that game open, breaks the dam open. Things stay the way they are. So that is one part I wanted to mention. I'll stop here and let you reflect. I have all the other questions that you asked as well, but what are your thoughts on this? I'll stop for that.
Thank you. I wish I could like slow down my train of thought like that when it starts off. Uh, yeah. So what you were suggesting, it kind of sounded like, help me understand this better. It sounded like copyright and patent laws, but with a shorter TTL and
Yep.
with a like computed TTL based on
Yep. Dynamic one.
what when a more dynamic depending on the situation of
Yeah.
things. Um, I am talking of. I mean, I think that's more policy wise doable as a delta. It's a shorter delta from where we are today,
Hmm.
for some legal protection to catch up to very fast spinning innovation and exponentially fast growing innovation. Um, the one thing I just wanted to just point out is that when we talk of the exponential growth curve, one thing to keep in mind is that it's a very, very, very zoomed out view
Hmm.
of progress as a whole. And it is also, it needs to have certain filters and not biases, but yeah, it needs to have certain filters to draw the exponential curve. And just the few things to keep in mind while talking of the exponential curve, and again, just for note, uh, is that if you zoom in, there are sharp drops
A lot of
in certain
times. Yeah.
places. It is also not uniform.
Yeah.
Like the access, one of the issues we have today in our society is access to any commons is not uniform,
Hmm.
and the common space is shrinking.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for shrinking of the commons, even before it reached mass access, happens to be this intellectual property right and copyright laws and private ownership and like land rights and so on. These are all connected. What I'm trying to say is that at a policy level, you cannot intervene on from one direction and claim that you have done good job without addressing all
Right.
these connected spheres,
Hmm.
um, and basically changing the landscape in how humans interact with their environment.
Right.
And one of those key critical parts of this thing that is missing from our legislations today happens to be the concerns for biosphere as a primary entity. Like, yeah, we take from forest. It's like human ownership rights come first. Uh, this is, of course, connected to like very strongly with the climate fiction that I've read and recommended to many people. And one of the things, I just happen to forget the name, but it's on the shelf. The Ministry for the Future. Yeah. So one of the things in there is so why I like the Ministry for the Future. And I just wanted to bring in this context because it is placed in the near future. It is a fiction, but it's called a climate fiction because it takes on how climate can evolve and charts potential consequences. And as the author calls it, it's his positive utopian view.
Hmm.
It's very grim.
Hmm.
So in one such podcast, he's asked that what is your view, and he says that this is what I have proposed. Even though it looks very grim, it's utopian because if we make out of this alive,
Hmm.
we should consider ourselves lucky. And what do we need to do in order to get ourselves out of this being the current complexity of situation, everything involved together? But one of the thing it does, it charts, tries to at least chart the course of consumer tech and what access do people get at certain points, what are the you know parts that come in. And just to tie that back, where it is interesting to me is that how she brings in two very interesting concepts. One, biosphere as a primary entity and laws being brought in as just like we have crimes against humanity, you have at a united earth level crimes against biosphere as something that is not as vague as crimes against humanity, which cannot be tried and persecuted, but actually ensuring the trial happens along those lines. The second thing he talks of, and this is what gets me the most, is of building a new religion,
Okay.
a new religion which worships the biosphere, whose chants are about keeping your environment safe, which does not I mean, it's these are there are many things, like for example there is the 2000 watts movement, which says that humans who are trying to follow that keep their energy consumption under 2000 watts till there is a until unknown until in this equation, until better sources and better access, better sources of energy and better access to energy comes in. So why I said all of this is when we're talking of the exponential curve, we are of course working in abstracts, but it's also important to remember that access is not uniform and access is not going to stay uniform. And there are certain key areas that really concerns us, which it seems like most people don't have that on their priority list. So when I talk to even people around here, and I see them burning garbage, and there is of course the limitation of language, but to the point that I understand, it eventually boils down to convenience, and it boils down to finger pointing in the terms in the points that, oh, the municipality is not clearing the garbage, so what options do I have? I have to burn it.
Right.
So then if we tackle convenience, intellectual property rights, and a bunch of all these systems together, an alternative that emerges before you can bring in such structural changes at a societal level is formation of more commons. If the thing that is reducing is common space, then organizations that form towards a certain goal how much more can they embody the idea of commons? And this is sort of trying to again work with startups which are trying to be unicorns, or are companies which are enterprises. And one common thing that I see in all of these places is that they don't want to be open. Eventually, the reason they don't want to be, even people with the best of intentions who would otherwise had put everything public, would have onboarded, made their technology open, use the investor money to just build the system, then the investors would have taken something back from that. um, the main issue is that it cuts across intellectual property rights and copyright laws, because those are the main things, according to them, that they are building, that will keep on running the machinery for years, generating revenues far higher than they can get to. The only issue, it's not, I don't have an issue with the revenue generating machine. I have an issue of who that revenue goes to, who's building the system, and who is eventually consuming the system. And take that same thing, put it everywhere, and you see a massive shrinking of commons. And I'll just leave you with one important thing. Over the last decade, let's start from 2010-11 to 2023. How many popular projects that grew up as open source, community driven, suddenly closed doors and became for profit? And then through community pressure released certain parts of it open source, saying that, hey, we now love community. I'm not going to name them, but this has been a trend, to the point that today it's almost a business proposition. You can go and sell this to a VC easier, that, hey, I am building a community first, I'm building an open source project first, for which I will then build a cloud offering. So the sort of self control of capitalism has come across, that how can we do that minus the backlash? So how we do that is we still keep the core product open, call it community edition, reduce features. Any further innovation goes into the enterprise product. So eventually, this massive attack that is creeping up on us in the form of encroaching of commons is happening everywhere, including in software. And a lot of that is connected to what we were talking about, consumer tech and the disabilities it faces today.
Right. So you touched on quite a lot of things, and all of those things are important to the point that I'm trying to build towards. That also brings up borrows from the previous points that we're trying to make, right? So let me, okay, if I become decoherent, let me know when I'm not making sense, right? But
Let me just make one part
yeah,
very clear here.
go ahead.
How this is working out over the last few, if I have to visualize this,
Mm-hmm.
is you are like these pillars. If you just imagine a flat surface, imagine pillars.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like this drone that goes around
Yeah,
through it, around the periphery, giving
watching it.
that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
eventually the pillars are coming up.
right. So first of all, that finger pointing part, like individual looking at this thing, that thing. Okay, if you look at it from a very high overview, this might, you may like or dislike this take, but the point is, if you look at it from a very high up level, the what's the carbon footprint and how does it affect us? The most major, like basically over 60% of it is from transport and electricity, like energy demand and transport. That's pretty much the most of it, if we can. And there's ways to eliminate that, first of all, and that can be done at an industrial grade level. Just by wanting to do it is all that you need practically. Like the technology exists, and it will ramp up the moment you show the money, essentially, like, hey, we are putting our foot down where we want this, more of this
So
thing to happen.
if,
So
if I may interject, it's basically telling the society that building dev tools
yeah,
can give you more money than building the consumer applications.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
More
That
money,
always the
or
same,
like how?
always the case. You so what part that Europe did right and continues to do right is that they don't go tell people how to live, how to behave. They just go ahead and make a park in the city square. People figure out what to do with that park. They'll live a happy, vibrant life, wear orange dress on Hague. It doesn't matter. The point is, nobody's told them that you need to do it this way or that way, right? You design this playground in a way it attracts the kids to go come out and play. And that's the goal, and that's the attribute of a good designer. A good designer would do that. Now, who would tell the people that in somewhat weird way got into the position that they're right now in? Kind of a little bit unfortunate, but I see a lot of, for lack of a better term, incompetence there. One side of things. So the point I tried to make there is that even without, give me a moment, right? So even without limiting the individual consumption or like a very basic level of amenities restriction, it is possible to limit about 60% or more of our carbon footprint very handily, very much possible. Why that is the case? Like, is there any harm in reducing carbon footprints by individuals? No, there isn't. However, for any growing or in the growth spur moment in as in community or a nation or a state or whatever that might be, energy demand, like as a, you can put it on a pretty much of a graph, it goes high up. There's no point. I mean, I see that as a
It's
somehow,
underinheard at a societal scale.
yeah, I see that as a double standard when some of the Western societies that got there faster, they utilized fossil fuel, they kind of made the climate what that is today, and then they tell that, okay, no, Nigeria, you're not allowed to do this, India, you're not allowed to do this, China, check it. Like, that does not work that way, right? Because again, the point goes more on the pathos side than the logos side. Logos is pretty much clear here. Everybody would try to live their best life, and they would utilize the power they meet, try to meet the power demand that they can, unless you allow the innovation to happen, which that's the part that needs to happen. Like at an industrial scale, if you make solar panels, all those things, different things happen at the industrial scale, that trickles down into life, like in common lifestyle, right? The building that I'm living in, it doesn't have solar panel installation on the top of the rooftop. It doesn't. But the moment that everything, all those, that ecosystem becomes more reachable, they would think that it is stupidity not to have it. At that point, we are limiting our footprint, even though that was not the primary goal or intention or the finger pointing at people pointing to others, right? So that is the point that I was trying to make, is that if you design the game better, it is played better, and overall outcome is also way above the expectation that you can have, or way above the result that you can get by individually limiting to 2 kilowatts, right? It don't even go get closer to anywhere closer to like the that household and all those things all together combined, that part is less than 12%, if I remember correctly. I'll give the benefit of the 20%. We, and the effort of empower, like in making that, is high,
It's
and
lesser.
effort is higher.
No. The percentage that he said of household, the actual
Yeah,
consumption
it's
is actually
lesser.
lesser than the
I'm
number.
giving you a benefit, as in I'm giving you a slack. I'm cutting you a slack. Like, let's say it's 20%. Even then,
That would happen if the power station is like within 2 to 3 kilometers of your
yeah.
residence.
So the point is, it is much easier to address or attack those factors that are contributing the highest, like basically the lowest hanging fruit, and then boil down, like go down that way. So you don't make a service reach like 6 nines or 7 nines of SLA by doing the most edge case solutions first. You just cut down the cost and like make the like server scale, how to scale it better, etc., etc., those things first, and then go on from there. So cut the edge cases later. That's the point. That's the approach I think would fit here as well, because it's no brainer. I don't think anybody would have problem with that. The other part is that the convenience part. Some way I do see all the consumer electronics and all the hardwares, all the utility that are being made not keeping in, like being one with the environment in a sense, like for lack of a better way to put it, like it's not made in a way that you need to care about the environment. That's why we made it this, because short term game, anybody who is trying to make it cheaper and not caring about the environment would sell more devices. So the company that is basically taking the short end of the stick by caring about the environment, they're basically going out of business. They would go out of business, right? So there is not going to be any business, and there would be the case study that people learn from, that hey, these guys cared about environment and then went out of business. Nobody else is going to try that one. So if you think about the part that you mentioned, the like, you cannot keep on extracting the rare earth minerals, lanthanides and stuff, and then put them in a device, and after 3 years that device is thrown out. That lanthanide is constantly, it's not recycled, it's not reused, anything that goes out, that is some in somebody's shelf being unused, literally paperweight, and you have to go and mine more. That is not a good way to set up the system.
Which points me to what I was like, one of the areas that I really, really want to work on in the near future, and it is recycling, like improving recycling tech. Because I don't see plastic as the problem. I see the usage of plastic, the not recycling efficient, like
Yeah,
efficiently, leaking, like trashing it, that thing leaking into the ocean as the problem. Because what if, let's say, we discovered uranium way before, we did not learn how to handle it, and we like, hey, we get portable bottle mein power generator, like imagine that Bisleri selling a like 1 kilowatt per bottle.
sorry. Mm.
So if we had reached that stage,
Yeah,
then if we would have uranium like radiation leaking everywhere.
yeah,
So I do think the plastic as one instance is one of those cases where there is a technocratic solution to
yeah,
it.
for sure.
Whereas mineral extraction, there is it's not only a technocratic solution, because in the mineral extraction process, it is that we do need a certain amount of things, in which case it becomes an exploratory, an open-ended thing. So how do you then let's say mm, work on something like let's take lanthanide for an example, right? Even like what we are facing with the EV manufacturing today, any such extraction of rare earth minerals, one of the issues that I see in consumer tech and like that not recycling or that hyper extraction mode to cut cost. Because what are the areas that you can cut cost? It turns out that none of these companies are willing to cut cost by paying their executives lesser or their shareholders lesser, which is very troublesome. But they're willing to pay the source of the mineral lesser and lesser and lesser, to the point that the cost of raw materials is negligible in the total balance sheet.
Yep, for
And
sure.
then what if we enforce certain criteria to like, let's say, the system that we are in, we can either get in it, try to change it from the inside, we can build from the outside, or that you do, game it. Don't change it, game it, and then have it produce alternate outcomes. And one of this gaming it is no other interventions, simply make recycled materials that much capable, way cheaper cost than acquiring original minerals. Now you don't have to maintain a militia, you don't have to bribe governments, you don't have to do any of that. You can buy it off the market.
Yep,
And what is the one thing that these forces trust the most? It happens to be the market.
yep,
So what would it take then, like, which is basically on the lines of what you're doing with the solar energy, right? Bring it on the market in a form that is just not comparable economically to the existing solutions at hand.
that's the part they, as in the status quo hates the most or fears the most. Things getting out of hand, things getting out in the wild, people knowing how to do by themselves. That FUD,
Yeah.
sorry,
No, I was just about to say that that has been a fear of any large human
yeah,
organization ever.
always, which is which is silly because so last couple of days talking to another friend, I kind of realized how FUD works and why FUD works. I'm not gonna get into the details of that, but humans are very afraid creature apparently. Like it's very easy to make people afraid by saying some things,
It's a
and
feature, not a bug.
it was a feature, but now I'm not so sure anymore because it's kind of perpendicular to the when it was a feature, we did not have this rampant way of.
What I mean is the balance. I mean,
Yeah, the
it's
balance.
important to not
it
eradicate
crossed
it. It's
it cro-
important
it
to
crossed over.
balance it.
Yeah, nowadays, like it was not so easy to exploit that at the point where it was actually a feature. Nowadays it's so easy to exploit it, it's practically a bug, not a feature anymore. My dad clicks on any link that comes in a text format written. Basically, he's in his mind, in his childhood when he was raised, is like anything that comes in a written format is trustworthy. So that is, if you call it a feature, I understand, but the days have changed, right? So you have to install new software updates in your head. So I'm just like going into a weird tangent. The point that I'm trying to make is that it is not ever a healthy practice to let somebody else make the choice on behalf of you. And maybe the weirdest developer centric example that I can give you is that it's okay to use the one that I used to give 10 years back, is that it's okay to use jQuery as long as you can implement it yourself. So if you know how to do it, then to save time and cost and energy, go ahead and use jQuery. That's fine. Like, or any other framework or something for that matter. But like, don't mentally check out of the system so that somebody gives you a literally a bullshit in a box and charges you for that, and you happily buy it because you don't want to think about it. That is the level of convenience or mental checked outness that has happened, which is why people, like the people who are sneaky enough to understand this is happening, they are taking control, taking over, and abusing the system. Now, part of that you said, that which kind of goes into the like sense of anarchy or the natural order of things in a sense, that breaks the game out eventually when the game gets way too lopsided. As you are mentioning, like you can just try to break it in a different way. At some point that balance would shift, and it will become like, okay, you're the amount you're charging for these things, I can just go ahead and extract it, and I make sure that it breaks the game. It will break the game for everybody. Things will be in disarray. I just don't see the point in getting that far to have our things in order. Why not do it before? But I have come to understanding that does not happen. People are either dumb enough not to realize it or smart enough to realize it, that it is going to take a while and they can keep on exploiting until that point. And when that happens, they're just going to get out by saying sorry in somewhat ways, or paying $400 million in basically toll fees for the people who are in that position. 405 million, $100 million for those kind of fines does not do anything, jack shit. So it's not gonna hurt them that way. The way I see we can affect this system, which to expand on your point, is that make it accessible, make it spread it out in a way that anybody can, if they had the intent, they can go ahead and do something about it. Once that happens, you basically break the game. How do you approach it? But again, I have another question about the hardware versus software, but that's later. Are you looking for your cat? You're muted. Whatever you have been saying so far, I haven't heard.
I'm glad I was muted. But basically, the other cat had come. Can you just give me a minute? I need to close the
Sure,
other
go
window.
ahead.
I thought there was only this one
Go
open.
ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I came back and I have to clean later. That's fine.
I have no idea what just happened, but it seems like things are in disarray.
Things are. She'll
Uh,
be okay. This didn't get too much of a fight.
okay,
Um, yeah, but yeah, as it happens, my train is somewhere I don't know where of
okay.
thought.
I will get you back there.
Yes,
So
please.
I was closing my thoughts with the fact that decentralizing the not only the policy making or where the thought process comes in or the philosophy comes in, but the practice actually put the brass tacks, right? So that's the part where if you start making things more available, people to go ahead and make it and build it and like challenge that, like I don't need to buy this off the shelf, I can just go ahead and make one for myself. When it gets to that level, that's when the challenge with this monopoly or duopoly or all the other kind of like a vampiric market, essentially the corporation, they fall apart. That was kind of the solution that is obvious. Like I'm not, I don't think that you would disagree with it. I was just like, getting a thought back to that.
But the path you traced back is essentially the same or similar trajectory, which draws from a sort of like, let's say, politically from a socialist anarchist perspective, or whichever direction you take in terms of contemporary progressive movements, like whether it's feminism or everything, there are certain commonalities between all of this. And studying them at a theoretical level, experiencing them at a real, like in real life, and then looking at what are the things, some of the like, of course there are ideal implementations in terms of policies that I can think of, but I'd still do that knowing that I won't have the opportunity possibly in this lifetime anymore to make massive changes to the way policies are made in India, in a very specific context. That yeah, I can do things, but the reason I still do that is it's sort of imagining the ideal in some way and then working back from that, what are the stages, what are, and most importantly, not thinking of any such progress as linear. Ki, I will implement this, then this will happen, and then this is the next stage. Things don't follow linearity, especially in times when even your environment is uh, unpredictable
Mm-hmm.
to a larger extent. So all of this, what I was talking of as the commons, is basically where the real life, immediate low hanging fruits slash solutions intersect this long running ideal space. And that commons is very important. A lot of that is learned from, of course, laws and everything. But if you look at what is money, fundamentally it's a belief system. A state is fundamentally a belief system.
Yeah.
A democracy is a specific kind of belief system in which the state monopolizes the right for violence, which is why uh, everybody saying that we will live, we will not kill each other, we will live within, we will elect somebody. Why are we electing somebody? The part that is often missed in a democracy is it is not to run your government for the next 4 years only. I mean, that is, of course, the polite way of saying it. It means you are saying that you are enabling these few sets of individuals or this one individual to do what it takes to get their job done, not be within the same kind of things, but you're giving up some things, you're taking some, you're taking rights, you're taking like whatever is considered as human rights, representation rights, and then there are variations. But the one thing you are consciously giving away is the right to violence.
Yeah.
But then democracy, a good democracy, adds checks even on the highermost representative on what is acceptable violence. And that is why people end up suing the state. But anyway, that political narrative aside, why I brought this up is all of these are fundamentally based on belief systems. And I want to trace back to Hirokraja Deshe at one point.
Yeah.
Hirokraja Deshe makes for an amazing screening in our times, even though it was meant to be for the emergency era Indira Gandhi government and the people's movement rising up against it. Um, But as it happens, why this is so relevant today, I actually wanted to bring this up with Shotajit Rai last time, but then I
Mm-hmm.
forgot. Uh, but then the reason, sorry, which Hukumar Rayan, I said Shotajit Rai. But
I
वही
got the
generation,
context,
उसी
but yeah.
family में,
Hmm.
uh, the important part here is why commons is you are creating not an alternate means necessarily. You are creating smaller self-sustainable ecosystems. You are building support networks. You are building up to a point, or continue building, you will continue up to a point where people who are in their immediate vicinity or are connected through whichever method, people in a certain network, let's say, a network's effect can be profound within the network itself if it's a large enough network, and insulate itself from certain behaviors that is happening outside that network. And slowly, these you convert echo chambers to bubbles that eventually, bubbles in the form of the way universes
Forms,
work.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and they interact to the point that you have so many bubbles. So the future of governance, the way I see it, if we follow along a humanist approach, would possibly look very similar to Star Trek in the sense of the United Earth.
Hmm.
In this, but what does the United Earth do is a very important question here. In that context, is it that people are electing every step? It seems like there is no cash in that system. So sorry, why am I tying this together? Is that you are then empowering a sort of local consumption, local work, and replicators, I come back to them again and again, form a very critical part of that build locally, consume locally. One of the things that don't exist in that setup is this oceanic liners, unless, and you keep on seeing each time there is a Starship mission that is ferrying food, that is ferrying things, people ask, hey, starships are not meant for ferrying as a cargo ship. And then they say that no, this is important, this needs to go there because they have lost their capacity
Hmm.
of doing so. International or cross oceanic shipments are then interventions. They are not
The primary,
necessarily
yeah,
this
yeah.
the primary flow. So you break down globalization into this federated globalization system where and I have experienced some of that. Just wanted to point out
Hmm.
in terms of the reduction in plastic usage. So Kodaikanal, around the Palni Hills, there is a law which says that you cannot dispose plastic waste, loosely enforced because, well, but one of the rules that is known to everybody here is you are not allowed to carry 1 liter water bottles.
Okay, why?
They could give that much because, as it happened, tourism is the major thing here.
Hmm.
When people come in, they bring in a lot more plastic bottles, and there are no good well, there are no plastic processing units here, so things end up in a landfill, or they have to be carried down. So one of those policy interventions that have happened here bans plastic bottle usage within this zone, the eco-sensitive zone.
Hmm.
Now what happened as a result was people still use, like, you go to Sunday market, you will still see some vendors giving you plastic bags, but you will see more people refusing to take the plastic bags. They have already carried their jholas and they're bringing it. Now then, because that part is disabled, there is a lot of local growth that is happening here. There is a reasonably large local ecosystem of buying locally, eating locally, because you get fresh produce. And as a result, the Sunday market is like a once in a week affair, in which people from the plains come up with their stuff. Now, if this place was not sufficiently equipped
Hmm.
to cultivate, to farm, if
Hmm.
people here had not invested in, let's not just build houses, but let's build food sources, and then
Farmhouses,
we
yeah.
will sell whatever is surplus.
Hmm.
What that does is create this community effect that eventually everybody is doing it for money. The one who has 5 acre land has planted 4 acres of fruits and food and so on, and lives on a 1 acre part of it, which is still large. But as a result of this, what has happened is there is a reasonable surplus of food until the markets close up, until tourism drops. So there is still no safeguard. This is a very weakly balanced, very thinly balanced system, but it is still better marginally than if you just go down the mountain, where you immediately start seeing people using bottles, and you feel like, hey, I don't want to take, because I have now gotten into the habit, very
Mm-hmm.
important,
Mm-hmm.
of not using those things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
a lot of this happened because of this local empowerment
Mm-hmm.
that people felt, and some education in happening in a smaller community. But then this echo chamber does not really exist outside Kodai. The rest of Palani Hills, majority of it on this side, uh, don't have access to even these basic infrastructure.
Right.
So then what I'm talking of is equipping the commons, in enlarging the common space. One, it puts the it makes some people focus more on the possibilities of a space rather than a direct benefit, uh, determining like Bangalore, may parks close by 7 or 6 because the authorities have to lock and go home. It's their day job, because they
Yeah.
thought of it in that way.
Yeah.
It's not a commons, it's strictly not a commons, it's a state controlled property in which you are allowed access for 4 hours a day.
Yep.
So then I guess I am lucky to have had certain experiences in life early on, and one of them happens to be the open source community, publicly building software. And one thing I have seen there is ideas don't die out.
Yeah.
Because somebody had built something and it was public, somebody else comes along, improves on it, forks it, or builds with it. But there is that mindset which I don't see in much of the rest of the world outside these small bubbles. So then the question is, how can we build or encourage building more such locally produced, locally developed things, reducing in some sense, like not necessarily imports, but also tweaking some certain parameters in how we operate, live our daily life, just to see what changes come out of it. And I feel like just tweaking a few of these. So, for example, solar panels as a de facto thing. As more people want solar panels, more manufacturers will step in. It's a proven economic force. Don't need to do that. But first, who does this grassroots level work? And I feel like, you know, the clubs, like what we had seen as the clubs in growing up, Amra Shobai, Tomra Shobai, etc.
Amra
What
Kajon.
was that?
Yeah.
Amra Kajon. What were those? And these thoughts led me down to that I was told not to join these clubs because they are rowdies. Okay, but what are these rowdies doing? Oh, they don't have jobs, so they are getting together. Turns out those rowdies are your social workers.
Yeah.
Those rowdies were your quiz, chess, everything. They would host competitions in which people would go blow shank for like longest duration. But there
Somebody
was a
dies at
culture.
the in the middle of the night. They are the ones to take the dead body to
But
wherever
what
it
is
needs to go.
happening?
Yeah.
What exactly is happening there is exactly what I'm saying, that needs to be emulated, not just emulated, that needs to be enriched.
Yeah.
And I mean, all these makerspace, all these things, we have had clubs, boss.
You touched
And
on a you touched on a very critical point that was I was getting to, and I was trying to
yeah,
use an
sorry, carry
analogy.
on.
Uh, uh, just because so that I don't forget, I'll come back to this. I just wanted to mention the Wall of China. The way they transmit the message is not so. It's very smart way of doing it. They start lighting up all those hubs one after the other, right? And you can spread kilometers worth of long messages in a very small amount of time. Nobody can run that fast to tell the other end that okay, the danger is coming, right? So what is the point of that? The point is identifying those people in the right place, right mindset, right lookout, and with the equipment to light that fire. You don't need to convince everybody. And the reason you touched on the club, that's the point that I'm saying. There are always those unused matchsticks lingering around somewhere, feeling like they're wasted material, feeling like, or the society terming them as wasted potential. The point is, those potentials are waiting to be lit up. And how do you channel that lighting up, how do you give them the opportunity to light up, is where this entire the crux of like how do you make that is happening in Korea is not happening in other places. How do I spread this thing? How do I spread this fire? That is the entry point. Those are the people who would be the first
So
mover.
I have, when we were talking about, with Mozilla about maker spaces and all, I had this constant feeling. I guess you were aware of it. I have learned that later. Is I felt like we were reinventing the wheel somewhere, and I couldn't identify where. I had this nagging feeling that with what we are trying to do, it was reinventing the wheel. So to the point that I have now realized that these clubs, the social organizations, were the commons of our time, or are, I don't know what's how they are right now, but that mindset exists in the society. And if one was to import the concept of a makerspace, it has to be fitted into the format of a club and sold as a club. That now a parent like mine would say, hey, you can't go to this club, these are rowdy, but you can go to this club, they do interesting
Break the
things.
game. Very
Break the game.
carefully break the game. Yep.
Yep.
I agree, like 100% agree, and I think that's where the potential is. If you're trying to identify where how the fire spreads, figure out the people with the torches and sitting on the turrets next to you, light up your torch, and I would say that this is what I'm doing is like setting up that torch to be lit. One of the like grand hub of like hopefully that becomes one. That will be the ideal outcome in my mind that helps everybody else to light up their torches. So 100% agree. That is where uh, how do I wanted to put it is there are various kind of, you cannot put them in like very easily into different boxes. People have different mindset, different demands from their lives, and they go on about in different ways. But there's a certain kind of people who are really good torch bearers, for the lack of a better term. Again, we can come up with the better terms, but they want to be that torch bearer. They would become that. Just infusing or like injecting that ideology, basically spreading it out itself is more than good enough for it to spread. Those people would take that and run with it. Identifying that, it doesn't have to be everybody, just those people is good enough. As long as the information gets shared across everywhere, it basically starts manifesting into the ideal theory starts manifesting into the application of various things that the idealist didn't even consider were possible. Some of them they might not even be comfortable with, but it will be the case essentially. Sometimes that is how it is. Innovation does not happen keeping the morality in check all the time. Sometimes it does happen in the void of it. So, but being mindful about it and keeping on that journey is where the thing is. You cannot just restrict it with policy most of the time. That's the part, by the way, when I said that I have criticism against the European Union's policy makings. The restriction, like the criticism that I have, is that they're doing the good things, but out of a mechanism that has potential to cause great damage if in the wrong hand.
Have you had a very progressive mama or kaka or jethu who did better than your parents, or like were better than the average person, but you still found them severely lacking, but you could appreciate that they've done good in life?
Opposite, they haven't said. I have always
Okay.
seen them not doing good enough, and that's not anybody else. It's basically my father himself being that person, um, who basically এই ঘরের খেয়ে বনের মোষ তাড়ানো যাকে বলে, like it's basically that. He gave up his career caring about the party, the politics, the other things. Like he's basically, in a sense, like I'm using the basically a lot, but like cut me slack here. The point is, I'm overwhelmed with how much to basically share here. Basically, right. So anyway, I'm very familiar with that concept. So, why do you ask? Like, was there any particular way
That
I saw
Jetu is
that?
EU.
Oh,
That
wait. The did well part? Yeah, so that was my intention. That was very much intended. So I come back to this particular topic multiple times. I did not believe in school system. Like I did not enjoy the way school worked, and I did not think that it's gonna get me anywhere that matches my maximum potential, whatever I can do or anything else. Like I didn't trust the system. Yet I did not come out as a loser. That was always my game. I am playing a game. I'm gonna win it, and then take my like as in trophy and kick it out of the like as in window. Essentially, that was my game plan always, all the time. Why do you say that? I'm still curious to ask, but I think it
I
was
just
intentional.
that was just a very parallel. I'm sorry if I triggered
Go
many
ahead. No,
random thoughts,
it didn't.
but it was just like drawing a very suburban Bengal analogy to the position of EU in policy making.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a society of Madhyabitta Bangalis, EU, sorry. So in a society of Madhyabitta Bangalis, EU happens to be that
Success,
um, uncle who has done,
successful uncle. Yeah,
slightly better, the
yeah.
successful uncle. But then when you can talk to them, you realize that you still they that what they have done is they have heard a few people and they've taken a few decisions here and there. They themselves have not approached it from that point of expertise. So what I mean is that the EU lawmakers are still lawmakers,
Mm-hmm.
and the unfortunate thing there is still that amount of, even the most progressive among them have to put up with many other pulls from other end, that the ones who would have legislated better legislations, because a lot of this, the eventual laws that you see, all law is some form of a compromise among the parties involved, where they are agreeing to work among themselves in some form or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, EU is like this uncle who's done,
Okay.
but not that. Don't no need to walk backwards. I'm open PC over here. Yes,
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the analogy here. I understood the premise of it. Oh,
topic of
are,
discussion.
are you stuck?
It should get better.
Yeah, it
I
got better.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, are you stuck, step friend?
Yeah. Sorry, please continue. I think I derailed everything there, but
Yeah. So
continue if you can.
I was with you on that part, like the initial premise part, but then I kind of my mind kept running and I kind of lost you on the last part. It got a little bit choppy as well. So you said that okay, so that's the uncle that did well, and then trying to basically flex on that essentially
Please
in a
don't
sense.
linger that. That's a dead joke. Let it be. It's buried. Just
No,
move on.
it's fine, it's fine. It's not dead joke. I'm just trying to understand like how does that manifest? Like as in, um, if they're trying to show something and there's a lacking part, how would you term that? Like what is that lack in
Who?
e- e- European Union, EU? Like what's the policy making could employ or like level up that makes it better? Or is policy making even a solution for the things that they're doing? I don't have any solid belief on either of those things, but I'm just asking to see if you have any thoughts on that.
I do have a lot. It's just that I don't think I am as well qualified to answer that question in the broader context. But I can just tell what is my subjective interpretation of this
Go ahead, that's fine too.
is it's the nature of EU in itself, as it is a conglomeration of strong powers, weaker powers, and we have seen Greece go like face certain aspects of that in terms of what does it mean to have Swiss banks and German banks competing your ecosystem, and it just completely drains you. The issue that I see is that the people who don't like the EU don't realize that they don't like how it has been implemented. There is choice of improvement. But instead, they go and say the EU and the concept of conglomerations or associations or federalization is bad because it will never work, because humans will never agree. There are too many nevers. And if this is on the lines of why UK chose to exit from the EU. A lot of their points were on the same grounds. But where can the EU, specifically, where can they improve is if they start looking at legislations as templates. I know it's a very difficult job to do. It's a very difficult job to do because you have to let go of certain powers that legislation currently controls. And what I mean as templates is in the same way that if legislation worked in the same way that researchers worked, which is I publish my research, you take it, you improve upon it, and you make that much adaptable. But I also very clearly, as part of my research, publish exactly what conditions these apply in. So the issue I have with EU is the moral high horse that EU takes in the global stage as a result of having now forced Apple to only have USB-C chargers. I mean, yeah, repairability is fine. But then how does that sit in the context of a broader society where you cannot be insulated? And I'm pretty sure the EU is aware of all of this, that you cannot be insulated from the things that you have done in the past and things that are happening around. Now, if you have, like, what I think is there is a certain ego dissolution that needs to happen in current day policy making, where the ego dissolution has to happen at that level where you are not just you I mean, just in order to get voted, somebody will be like, oh, we need to respect patents and we need to ensure these strong laws, that is how we protect. It's like good intentions, bad tooling is where the EU is currently. What that leaves the scope open for is the moment this present leadership is slowly replaced by the right or alt-right, far right, they have not improved the tooling. They have not put in a lot of those safeguards, which means somebody can come in, use the same tools, and claim good intentions because they will, in the very right wing way of that we see happening around the world, say that, hey, we are using the same tools that you did. Were you evil? Would you call yourselves evil? So when we are using that tool, why are you calling us evil? And this argument is a deadlock. It
Right.
serves nobody. It does not serve the citizens. It does not serve the legislators. It definitely does not serve any in the future generations. I think where things need to improve is representation.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say representation, I don't just mean races. I mean disciplines. I mean domains.
Domain
I
knowledge, yeah,
mean,
that's one of the
yeah,
things that I
and
see lacking most of the time.
yeah, because you first win the trust of the people, a generic trust of the people, and then you put who you like in these different portfolios. No other industry in the world operates like that. Do you hire any random person and then choose where they will work? Will they become an engineer? Will they become this or that? And then you move them around as you please, not letting them complete their work. And again, I'll take refuge in science fiction and climatic fiction. Uh, Two series I want to mention. One is, of course, The Ministry for the Future. The other is the Three Body Problem and its relate and the trilogy. The three body problem, or the Remembrance of the Earth trilogy, as it's known, it is a diametrical opposite view of Star Trek about the universe.
Okay, how so?
In
I
fact,
haven't
its
read it.
answer to the Fermi paradox
Mm-hmm.
is that everybody is hiding themselves because it's the dark forest. If you reveal yourself, somebody will reveal your location to higher beings who then don't want you to cross that threshold, so they'll attack you. Diametrically opposite of Star Trek, which says first contact we make, but with certain precautions. Uh, I forgot why I went there. But yeah, the reason I want to take refuge in these systems is one thing that they both, and these are all thought frameworks, right? That have evolved from present day realities, mapping them to something else. One of the things that they both have come across is in order to drive certain amount of progress, humanity needs leadership where the leaders are trained in the discipline they're leading in,
Mm-hmm.
which means the minister for health in these cases happens to be the chief surgeon. the like
It doesn't
basically
happen that way. Yeah.
no.
But
So
yeah.
what they chart is what breakdown. So these are all different narratives.
Hmm.
They break down human society. They decompose either through an existential threat or some crisis, something or the other. The role is how do we get there? I mean, the goal of each of those systems is how do we get there? And till date, I have not seen a single narrative, a single model which can reach those stages without breaking down or without a major catastrophe or without a major loss, pushing people to rethink what it means to do the same things.
The reason is quite similar to what I see in academia as well. If you create a
I meant this is a pathos.
yeah, if
This
you
is a
create a
pathological situation that you can apply,
yeah, the
and it fits.
same thing, that if you see that what is governed as an this policy making, the way it operates is to the proportionality of is to the academia, normal academia, casual academia, and the academia is to the bleeding edge engineering, the way, like say for even AI paper publishing, etc., the way it is going on, it's pretty much the same. The difference between is so static, so stagnant, so out of the like, so weird that academia even makes sense, right? And then academia doesn't make sense compared to the way the hyper fast like publishing paper on GitHub as GitHub readme. That's what is happening now. Everybody's fantastic, like happy about it. So the paper and the demo of it comes in the same repository. You can go ahead and try it. You can read the paper and try the demo at the same place. How fantastic is that? You can just go ahead and put that on a Hugging Face, and then somebody else can try that out too. Those things just didn't like boil down to academia yet. And similarly, the practices that academia hasn't boiled down to the policy making, governance, and those kind of systems. They're what academia is working with, like a 200 years old system, and what governance is working on with is basically 2000 years old practices. Hasn't moved out from that.
So I'm going to take those three
Mm.
layers and try to answer why commons. And it boils down to letting people make their own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
How granularly can you make? How and the quick and the distribute of the results back.
Mm-hmm.
So the commons, uh, the reason I'm bringing up the commons here is that one way to break this down without a deadly catastrophe or existential threat, in the absence of such, or let's say I at this point would refer to that movie on Netflix, Don't Look Up, if you have seen
I
it.
have seen it.
We are in that state, right? Will have don't that it's a very good analysis of our times in from a certain perspective, especially that last moment when you see the comet in the sky and the person actually says don't look up, because if you look up you will see.
Yeah.
So I want to see what would it take to build an alternate such that we empowered people to live along those lines, that okay, you know what, you make a policy, then you research on that policy, which is your academia, then you implement the policy, which is your engineering, then you use that implementation, which is your mass market, like market basically after that. And I feel like there is a certain possibility of educating at a mass scale, spreading awareness at a mass scale, if you just showed people that what it takes to really build policies, what it takes to really work on the research, and what it takes to build something is not as vast as mystical. It is work. It is definitely complex, lots of hard work, but it's probably the kind of work that people are capable of, as opposed to this mysticism that surrounds the entire governance machinery with almost king at the head and so on. But what what I'm trying to say is that if you map that to some of the things that we have been talking of, policy making is sort of the search for maxims, which means it cannot happen in a vacuum without inputs. then academia is a sort of testing those maxims, or like finding out edge cases, finding out where that needs to be improved. So if you place these three, academia at the center, market on the other, policy on the right, you would have reinforcing loops from both the things.
It's an
But
adversarial loop that goes both ways. Like one,
yeah,
it
so
goes
we
this
have a
way.
kind of a broken
Yeah.
loop that happens here today.
Mm,
What I'm talking of is strengthening that.
mm,
But there is another loop that is needed, that is absent today, is from the market to the policy, without the academia as a separate loop, which is where the AI as an example comes in. That the academia, because of the way it needs to rigorously research certain things, cannot alone demystify things for policymakers.
right.
And
Um.
that policy has to scale itself to an algorithm level
Right.
where it is letting go of specific controls in favor of better prediction.
Right.
So
It
that's
gives
my
me.
answer to
No,
what do
no,
I,
no.
where do you think EU can improve?
Right. It gives me a lot of food for thought. Actually, I was trying to talk about Bun. I don't know whether you have come to know about Bun. Bun, the
No,
JavaScript runtime, new JavaScript runtime, like server-side JavaScript runtime.
no, I haven't. Dino
Bun.sh.
was the last I signed off on.
Okay, so Bun came out very recently. Oh, then it would not make any sense for me to bring up. Anyways, it will still
Oh no,
make
no,
sense.
I can look it up.
Yeah, you can just
You
look
can
it up.
you
Look
talk.
up
I'll look it up.
afterwards. Look up afterwards. Like it's a long thing to like go through. They are making huge amount of strides and progress and claiming big numbers on various other things. They're doing some good works. Some of those things like people have criticism about. The part that I see is like, why would somebody choose today to make a new server-side JavaScript framework? Like, why would they think, and how would they end up raising money for it, right? So in my mind, I'm trying to build the game. Like, why is that? Where does it affect, and how effective is that? So what I'm saying is that
And you're
if
saying this is not yet another framework syndrome.
no, there is a certain takeaway there, which applies or ties back to the discussion that we're having yet so far, governance, like policy making and breaking apart the game. How do you successfully break apart the game and break apart the status quo? Um, and Bun kind of takes the approach, not exactly the one that I would take, but it's much more human, like much more modest or palatable in that sense. Like, so that's the part I'm trying to explain. What they did is that they, okay, have you watched the movie 300? Right? So in 300, showing that the God King bleeds was the entire point. Like, he brought 300 men. All he has to do is to prove that this guy is defeatable. I don't have to defeat you. I just need to show that you are not. You basically, you can die. If we have brought more people, we could have owned your ass, right? It's just that nobody trusted me. But I now can, I have proven that you do bleed. I can put a dent on you. That was all the point that he needed to make, and he did. And that is enormous from a perspective that you need to see it from. Like, how does that affect the oracles? How does it affect the other kings of that, like how Greece was structured at the time, Sparta, Athens, all the other kind of things. So point is, making that point, the God King blades, is essential at some level. Bun did exactly that. They showed that these things are possible and you guys are not doing it. We used even an inferior tool to show that this is possible better than you. We used an inferior tool and made something that is more performant than yours. What's your excuse? It's pretty much that. And to make that point, and people even like, if there's like half the people liking it, half the people hating it, that is still more than what they could have expected, because I don't particularly see the utilitarian perspective of why somebody would make that, but I see the idealistic perspective of why somebody would do that. Now, Node literally has the fire up their ass as behind them, they need to match or exceed that. Same as Yarn. When Yarn came out, they challenged Node, right? And then, sorry, NPM, and NPM had to level up their game, and they did. And then Yarn kind of fell out of fashion. Still, people still use it, but not because of the same reason that they initially claimed, that it's faster, it does this and that and all these things. It still does, but NPM matched that. And how else could you have matched NPM to do that? Because the moment they create a consortium or like some kind of a body or org, they become the status quo. Nobody's challenging them. And their motivation is to do the certification, bring out the security patches and all these kind of things, not make the ecosystem faster, more user friendly, or all those things. How do you instill that fear in them that if you don't, I'm going to go ahead and take your cookie? You have to come up with an alternative solution that strikes, right? You cannot go and submit a patch to Node.js community. It'll just get closed after 2 and 3.5 years, right? HTTP 3, the quick protocol, still is unimplemented in Node, last I checked. And Go, Rust, they already have half the web has moved on essentially with web as in HTTP 3. And being the primary server-side JavaScript runtime, Node still hasn't implemented it. What does that tell you? That they just don't care. They're too big to fail, essentially, in their own head. How do you break that? How do you break that game? Going back to the same concept, same analogy, same perspective, even if you take Apple or Google or whatever the giant you're facing, the solution, in my mind, like I do, again, I'll come back to this point again, all over again. The point that I'm arguing versus point where the hill that I actually stand on. The hill that I actually stand on is go ahead and show them how it's done, even for no other reason, just for the cloud, just for the heck of it, just because you can. You don't have to become a billionaire out of this. Just put a dent on the giant. Put on your resume that I put a dent on this giant. That's all it takes, right? Because on that note, particular note, I don't really know exactly how to. Again, no controversial topic. I'm not gonna go into that part. Okay. Anyways, so that is my standpoint. Again, on the standpoint of IP and all, the point that I argued is the point that I argued. But my own standpoint, no IP whatsoever. I don't think any kind of knowledge whatsoever should have any kind of restriction whatsoever, no matter whatever the good caveats there are. You cannot have it both ways. You have to decide at some level of idealist standpoint where, like, no, I am taking this even if it has some vulnerabilities in some way. In my mind, information of all kind, in all form, of all times, should always be available at anybody's fingertip who wants to access it. Is there any downside to this? Probably. I'm pretty sure there is. But the upside far outweighs any kind of downsides. And I would rather live in a world that is infested by the downside of having information too wide open than not having information wide open enough. So that's my moral standpoint, my idealistic standpoint. But that's usually not the argument that I will pose when having the discussion that is more practical, grounded, or trying to make the mechanics of the game work continue forward. So the way I would project is like, if I'm a designer of the game, if I'm the player of the game, or if I'm the audience of the viewer of the game, I'll not say the same things. But that doesn't mean that I don't have distinctive standpoint on those particular points, right? Just to wanted to come clear on those aspects, and also clear on the fact that how to break that game. There is a way to do that, and some people sometimes do that. You don't make a lot of money out of it. You just do it for the clouds. And in my mind, that is fantastic.
And I think if in the process you make money, then it's a bonus.
Yeah, yeah.
But like it's also such that this reminded me of Mother of All Demos. Um, are you familiar with that?
No.
It's a 1968 presentation. If you search YouTube on Mother of All Demos, 1968, 67, go through it. at least watch it, or read about it. In fact, it's a pretty long demo and it gets pretty boring at some point.
Okay.
It was the first software hardware tech demo that we have since then internalized. When we like, it's like we are presenting something. What does it really mean to present a tech? The tech that was used to present those were all iterations. In 1968, these people did a live video conversation that was recorded, that had a personal computer making lists and sublists using a mouse, a keyboard, a display unit, and this person also had like a
The
view.
lav mic,
So
like, yeah.
so basically, what I keep on forgetting the name, but just if you follow the trail of mother of all demos, the work these people did unfortunately did not really see the production grade things. But till date, the user interfaces we use, the mice, the keyboard, the screen, these things are based on those work.
Yep.
So I do feel like, and I see there is a lot of scope. So what does that mean
Scotty,
for?
beam me up.
Yeah. So they, I have so far not come across that. It's usually beam us up, Scotty.
Eh,
It's one of those enigmas like run, you fools. Uh,
flee, you fools.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
then, I'm Batman. It's one of those cultural enigmas which it was actually not said. But yeah, so in any case, the way to then apply the same principles to social governance, or like any form of governance, and how do we improve such a system, time and again happens to be this concept of build an alternative, however small, that appeals to a specific subset where it hugely outperforms the status quo, to the point the status quo has two choices. The one choice they don't have is to ignore it
Yeah.
anymore,
Yeah.
right? They have two choices: they assimilate what you have built, or they fold you into and you carry on as a part of that larger being. So acquisition or assimilation by implementation in some form or the other. And there are some actual examples. Taiwan is one example of this, where, frustrated with access to government services, a team of hackers got together. I'm like making this into a romantic story at this point. Like, it's so much romanticized, but you kind of, uh, this is the shortest thing I can present. And they built an alternate citizen platform that integrated with all government APIs, that just allowed citizens better access to existing government systems, and kind of build alternate governance routes. It was an open source thing. Eventually, it became so popular, the government adopted it. It's like Mozilla buying Pocket. The government uh, adopted it, and um, they now, like, the leaders even actually collaborate or were ministers in a portfolio. Uh, but that is one success story that keeps me bringing back to this: ki a sufficiently well designed alternative is virtually indistinguishable from the original service. And that, where you are getting at, is pulling this identity politics by its collar, and say that, hey, I am supposed to get this from this. So what's the point of my having these identities, these cards, if I can't use it there, but if I get to use here? I had hopes that I had hopes like 20, 21-year-old me, when I saw these things like, Paytms come up and things like, oh, they are going to democratize access to governance services. I was so wrong. But the point is, it is possible. And these were all people driven efforts. These were all commons. If the same thing was built as a for profit that was trying to sell its software to the government, it wouldn't have had that effect.
Yep. Yeah.
So, on the same grounds, like, in parallel, I am also trying to work on something similar. That what does it mean to build these alternate governance systems? And there are quite a few. who
You
are
are
doing
talking a
some
lot
work.
about like as in operating for the commons. I would actually like to explore how does that look like as in
Yes, on the
functionally.
commons owning
Hmm.
the thing.
Can we?
You mean how does that look like in the sense is depends on what angle you're trying to approach. So let's say if it is providing like some sort of a citizen action tool, like through which or not action tool, even citizen engagement tool, being the intermediary between your government services that are already provided, that specifically citizens have already have rights to, but because they are behind so many levels of bureaucracy, even if they have APIs, you don't even know about them. So just facilitating that discovery through a holistic, like a uniform interface. So let's say you want a driver's license, you go apply that. You want a trade license, you know where to go, who to talk, kind of demystifying, making that simpler. That is a
I
similar
see.
thing that the Taiwanese people have built. So
Right.
then you are the software vendor and possibly also a host, because I see the value in building such a system in a way that other, let's say in the Indian context, this might be a state level implementation or central implementation, whatever. But can that, if you have built that once,
Hmm.
can that challenge citizen benefit delivery systems in other countries enough to adopt those standards? I don't need them to adopt the software.
Hmm.
So key parts being open, key decisions on how those place things were designed being open, and then you run this through that commons wala cost, because see, you have the benefit of scale.
Hmm.
A service like this eventually needs to charge very less per capita because there are more, your market size is pretty much the
Huge.
entire
Yeah.
country. So it then is on you, how much can you build such as, how better can you build such a solution that it reaches everybody. So then you focus on that. The revenue plans and all kind of fall through. You then
So
collaborate.
I so I heard you. The way I think sometimes it can
This is an
work better.
example.
Yeah, yeah, I got that. So I was trying to pitch or like basically pose an idea. Is that how about sometimes it not being a monetary as in implication? How about some kind of a benefit or pass that you get by doing things a certain way that aligns with the goal or a vision or a bigger picture. For example, you can go ahead and build non-sustainable devices, but if you do make sustainable devices, you get tax benefits or you get land to like build your factories more like at a better place, etc. All those things on the basis that or on the accord that you are committing to building these things that has long term, because you're not going to make as much money, you're going to lose a little bit because of you're competing with people who are more now focused and you're focusing on the future. So how about I give you some benefit to focus on the future and give you that runway that you don't go out of business, because at the end of the day these are all infinite games, and whether you can stay in the business or whether you go out of business are more important than what's your quarterly bottom lines are, right? So if the government, I don't really trust that governments can actually do that to that extent, but this can
There
be
are
implement.
precedents
Yeah.
in recent times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, mm, a few states in India have brought out EV policies. Tamil Nadu is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was released March or sometime this year. If you look at the TNEV policy 2023,
Mm-hmm.
um, so what happens in these cases is that the governments have identified certain goals. So what I'm trying to say is that it needs political will for that to happen,
Yeah.
and that is the slowest of all to form in the scale of everything that
Yeah.
we were discussing. Uh, so you need either a proactivity, or there needs to be a way to channel private funds in a sustainable way, which would mean that if let's say one way of looking at it is the way we talk of our tax money when our ministers go somewhere, we say that हमारे tax money पे जा रहा है, but it's not necessarily that it's exactly that money that you put in which they have taken the money from you. right? But why I am able to say it is this concept of a shared ownership, so to say, that I have as part of being the citizen of this country, that my tax goes in the same pool. These are known concepts. Can we ride on that known concept, bring in a sort of equity in it, ki you are an owner de facto as a result of being an entity, a human or whichever.
Yeah.
You are by default an owner, which means you can have a right to say things, but then have protocols in place to gather a bunch of those, pool resources from the people. So such a system needs to go more like a build more like a library, where people are pooling together funds to build and keep it running through a subscription that they are paying. And as we have seen, the economies of scale dictate that not everybody needs to pay. Some
Mm-hmm.
people can pay more. That is how you make this an equitable system.
Mm-hmm.
But here, the equity, however, is not going to change based on how much money you put in, because
Okay.
somebody else can put in work. So you're kind of talking of that abstract currency at some point, a medium
Yeah.
of exchange, right?
Basically, how much
Right.
value do you bring to the system on a non-temporal manner?
Yeah. So let's say in it's a sort of karma. I
Mm.
mean, whatever word you want to put to it, but I think it's a sort of pseudo currency that comes in. And that same thing then says that, okay, if you have, let's say, helped another citizen. So how you grow this, and this is not my original, this is something that a friend has really charted, very
Right.
detailed,
Right.
is you build these citizen groups where somebody helps somebody to do something and thus get some credit, which they can use to get something of their work done, just to paint a brief
Right.
picture, right?
I did think about this particular aspect. I went pretty far and then realized this exact same model can be used for monitoring civilians. Like the entire surveillance platform works the exact same way.
Yeah,
It does not
yeah,
look
yeah.
any different.
So
Identifying and allocating
now
points to citizens is the same thing.
that is that is fine,
Yeah.
but again, I would say surveillance is just monitoring done one way.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Point made. Understood. But still, please do explain.
So uh, if within a domain there has to be transparency, then privacy laws would determine the extent of the domain itself, that within this scope things should exist. So just like we know that certain features today, we are in that model dilemma that a company like Apple, who's where I say that, hey, find my phone is a useful feature for me, but I know they have got access to it. I know that things can happen with that data. So there is, in today's age, I mean, there is this moral uh, uncertainty on, is this the right approach or not. So in that sense, if you make that surveillance capable both ways, to the point that it's kind of like equipping both sides,
Hmm.
you are playing that mm, weapons dealer in a war kind of a scenario,
Yeah.
and you want the war to go on. I want to take that approach and apply to this citizen versus state, and say that within this system, every actor, if they choose, if they have given the permission, everybody else can view them uniformly. But again, what I mean making monitoring both ways is just like a state can monitor the actions of a citizen. Can a citizen collectively monitor the actions of their elected representatives and hold them accountable? That you had told us in your election manifesto कि तुम ये काम करोगे, how much of this has done, and here we have the data showing that you have done nada. We are not going to vote for you next time unless you fix this right now. What we don't have today is that observation capability from citizen to the elected representatives. There is data, everybody is publishing data, but because nobody is using it at scale, there is no accountability. So how does such a system build accountability, enable this reverse monitoring of a situation through collective data that everybody owns?
A lot of thoughts going on in my head with that. partially because any effort on that end to that end will immediately get termed as anti-state or projected in
Yes.
that way or get
Yes.
diluted, or some key personality will get pulled out through either money or through bullets. So point is like it will not be a very pretty sight to
So
implement that.
you are right. You're absolutely right. But what appears here as a thin line, I see that as a very broad shelf. And I see very clear ways. So, see, for me, I am not hung up about how this is done.
Yeah.
I am hung up, however, that this is done in the most sustainable way.
Hmm.
So, if sustainability is a factor, then there has to be certain compromises to what you are doing. You can't go extremely resource hungry, break the government, or disrupt. I'm not looking at any of that.
Right.
I'm simply staying within a certain accepted framework and talking of. So, what I mean by that being a thin line, that thin line is a broad shelf to me, is I see very clear ways in which this can benefit the maximum without disrupting. Because the best form of change that I have come to realize is a change that you don't realize you are undergoing, but you undergo. Back and say how far we have come. So, tweaking. I'm talking of an experiment in tweaking the parameters of our existing system. Let's get it to its most efficient. I don't want to break it. And I would like to think that our current systems, at their most efficient
Hmm.
possible, would actually yield considerably different outcomes than they yield today.
Right. I think there's a lot of like you have a lot to say about this, and I don't think it is coming across well enough, and I am not in a right mindset right now to dig the entire. The way I'm seeing it being done right is a couple of things. You prepare a script for this, like write the thing up. I told you about anthropic inertia, right? So prepare a script for this. The way it goes, you write up a blog post in your spoken manner, the way you would speak it. You would say it like if you stood up on a stage and you had a basically you had a soapbox, you stand on it and you give it as a speech. Write in that way. Give me 5 to 10 minutes of your voice recording, the best voice recording possible. You giving a speech, like that notion, like the way you would want that. Now I have 11 Labs paid subscription, so I can just go ahead and create a clone of your voice if you allow me to, or you can do that yourself as well. Then you can generate from that text, you can generate the entire podcast kind of episode, or if you choose to, you can just read it out and record that. That's also fine. It requires a little bit more editing, but if you're confident about it, you can do that as well. And then we can publish a new episode on anthropic inertia about that particular consolidating that thought process. What are the points that you're trying to make, and what are the it doesn't need to explore in depth every part. It just needs to show all the pathways from where people can jump off and like basically do the moonshot themselves. Like if they can go that direction, it shows the direction. If you want to go here, take this path. If you're going to go there, take this path. It doesn't have to handhold and take them there, but as long as you're showing the path and direction very minutely at every limited distance, that is good enough. If can you do that, like no pressure, no, I'm just saying that this is the format that we can do and try to work off
Yeah,
of.
I'm just concerned that 10 minutes is, it will be very
It
difficult
does
to
not have to be 10
compress
minutes
that into 10 minutes.
I do that because I was experimenting with it.
No, no, I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying my understanding of this is still so
Yeah.
disparate, so spread out, but with some very strong links. And as
Hmm.
it happens, at one point, just during COVID, when I was at my worst, this was an idea that a friend came up with.
Hmm.
And I tried implementing it and I got sick. So anyway, it did not get much far. But there are some very crucial aspects to it. Specifically, I want to just mention one point. In many cases, revolutions, where do they fail, or what
Do you want a correct answer?
what
Do you
could
want the
be?
correct answer or do you want my my
There
perspective on
is no
this.
correct
I
answer.
know
I'm
exactly,
talking
that's
about
what I was gonna
your
say.
perspective
Yeah,
on
exactly. So
this.
right. Hmm.
Uh, and all I'm saying is, I want to focus so strongly on the sustainability and intersectionality, the two entities, I would say, that are these, like, they are like the North Stars.
Mm.
The things that don't change are compromises on those 2 points. And then if you revisit the same systems, the same processes, the same revolutions again and again, you would see them take a different shape. So what I want to, and I want to like put a pin on this particular thought, that if intersectionality and sustainability were the two non-negotiable aspects in an organization or in a system that you build, what would anything that you have talked, you being we in general, we've talked of, would look like? And I do think that there are some things that would you would do different. So for example, because of that sustainability as a focus, I would resist from this thing becoming a tool of rebellion against the current order. Because a good virus, as that same friend says, does not kill its host.
Yep. Yep. Agree.
So there is a need to be that good virus in everything that we are talking of, to a certain extent, but not be only the virus.
Yeah. I have one. The way I am rephrasing it in my head is that not to fragment the North Star in two different parts, but if you design the game in a sense where the North Star is timeless, not like I'm rephrasing sustainability as
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
timelessness,
So when
right?
I said North Star, I meant that they are
That's
in the
fine. That's
same
fine.
place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's not why I'm like jabbing at. Point I'm trying to make is that I'm rephrasing sustainability as timelessness. The reason for that is that it is more encompassing. Sustainability is enclosed in timelessness, a timeless plan, a timeless approach to something. And if you start your journey, the way you do it, like a how, is um, intersectionality. Like you start by doing that, like you design the game in a way where intersectionality starts, like you start with that, it plays a major role and starts showing the result. Then the game is designed for intersectionality and it gets played on that way, and that brings up faster innovation that goes, and the North Star is set, like the timelessness is where we are getting at. So those two things played out. So I would say that one is the goal, like where you're headed, like the why, and the how is the intersectionality. That is that only like difference that I would make in my head. As it,
And that is absolutely the way to go. So when I say sustainability, it's a matter of breaking that into human understandable time
yeah,
chunk.
I see, yeah.
It's like right now I'm saying that, okay, in a society that thinks 6 thoughts a minute, to that telling them that this has to work 5 years later seems to put enough constraints. But to the people who think in 5 year terms, telling them to think in 50-year terms has a different consequence. So basically, sustainability is this constantly moving target, which is where that it should not be short. So timelessness is the actual value on which is based. Because what this means is, how do you then define organizational goals and successes and failures? You no longer do a quarterly planning. You no longer say that, okay, I have initiative A and I have initiative B. Initiative A is going to take me 5 years, deliver a benefit to 10 people, but the result I would get in the next 5 years from that will deliver the benefit to 100,000. So, what such a system needs to ensure specifically is that it sees through that eventual goal. That 5 years later, once this thing has been made for 10 people, the initiative does not stop. So that is the tricky portion to solve. That sustainability as timelessness means a bigger challenge from a physical world's perspective because things die. So then it simply says that then the key drivers of such a system cannot be perishable entities. So then what are non-perishable resources that such an organization can have?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that breaks the anthropic boundary.
I see. In as in, do you see that as an utopian perspective or dystopian perspective?
I think
Synergistic.
it's a very synergistic. It's something that tries to hold a balance.
Mm-hmm.
Like not go into a dystopia, not go into an utopia. Instead, if like why I say this is a north star, and in such a implementation as it becomes timeless becomes the north star for the rest of the thing, which means the whole organization, the whole initiative has to embody that non-perishable entity
Right.
feature.
You have to ensure, you have to realize that you're playing an infinite game, and you have to ensure that you continue to play that infinite game, and
Yep.
your actions and their small wins do not result in big losses. That's the goal. Like,
Yep.
as long as you're
Yep.
focusing on it, I think
Yep.
it does. It is starting to show the effect, not from unlikely sources. So there is the March interview of Jensen Huang, the Nvidia CEO, where he touches on that. Keeps on talking about this, but on leadership, if I remember correctly. So something like that. Jensen Huang on leadership, one of the interviews. It's on YouTube, and I'm not sure how genuinely it is coming. Give me a moment. I lost the audio. So how genuine he is about the point he's making. But what he mentioned, it makes sense that he in his organization he does not have the quarterly plans or quarterly goals or yearly plans, yearly goals or anything. The goal is make the most future facing company, as in, that is possible. It's not about make the best GPU that is possible, even, right? Like, as in, what would you want in the future, and what do we need, what kind of weapons do we my interpretation of that, what he said, like, I'm paraphrasing it, of course, I'm not saying the exact same things he said, that what kind of fights humans will fight, like, in future, what kind of weapons would they need, we want to be that weapons dealer. I think that's a very, very, I don't necessarily agree with that approach. I don't disagree with that much as much. But if you want to stay in that game and keep on playing that, there's a damn good game, like, as in, plan to have. You can't possibly lose on that, and that's the result that is being shown for last couple of years. They are constantly going on that trajectory. Whether you're butthurt about it, whether you like it, whether you hate it, it doesn't matter. They are making it happen, and that micro decision differences between AMD and Nvidia, between Intel and Nvidia, those differences, and it's not about only those companies. Anybody who is trying to play that infinite game and trying to go that way, go that route, will start creating so far big of a margin that it will be impossible for the limited, like the finite game players, to even stay in the game for much longer, because we have to understand the implication that things are moving much, much faster than before. So you cannot go about this whole thing with lack of agility. You need to have the adaptability and agility of thinking on your foot and be able to change your standpoint or the planning, etc., on a moment's notice. And that cannot happen if you have a yearly plan, annual plan that is perpendicular to that. It doesn't work that way, right? So anybody who's playing finite game will basically gradually, on a big picture level will gradually start to fall apart. You wouldn't see that on a one-to-one rating, but if you plot them like thousands of those data points on chart, you'll start to see that splitting out. One is kind of racing faster than the other, and that is going to happen. I say Nvidia is an unlikely source, but because you would expect them to become that finite game player where they're winning and they're happy about it, happy about just doing the same thing that is earning them money, but they're not. They're not doing that. They're like, okay, this has gotten us here, and this is good enough. This is keeping us afloat. We're swimming in money, but this is not the end story. What does 2025 have in store for us, and what kind of tools people would need in 2025? Let's go ahead and build that today. That's what they're getting at, and I think, yeah.
So this is sort of the racing against time kind of
Yeah.
approach, but like the outcome that is wanted is sort of want to be there before others. The approach, utilitarian approach of it, kind of I agree to a certain extent. Of course, I don't see eye to eye on most of the things.
Yeah, same.
What this means
Yeah.
is for an organization, remember that the ego dissolution that I talked of, that what was that ego dissolution? Why did I drop it suddenly here? Is it means organizations need to grow beyond thinking of just themselves. It's like a human alone on this world cannot survive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, you can survive. You can't have this level of life, this quality of life. But then there is also the other part that you need to look. I actually like the timelessness better because it fits with whatever I'm saying now. Is you need to look at not as time spent, not as hours spent on something, not as what will we do next quarter. By the same logic, it is not enough to have a 50-year or 5-year plan,
Mm-hmm.
because if your 5-year plan is built of 4 times 5 20 quarters, then there is something wrong with it, in the sense that you are betting everything on that one resource that you have no control over. And that is the fundamental problem of time based building that we see in majority of our economy today, across tech, everywhere. uh, Instead, if you move to objective oriented, outcome oriented, like some management gurus now talk of that as a better way of managing because they have learned. But yeah, with all due respect, the idea here is, if you focus on an objective, and the objective, achieving the objective through certain boundaries, safeguards that have been set, uh, is the key focus. The first thing that you need to let go is thinking of the human ego as the builders, as being greater than the system that they are building.
Yeah.
And what I mean is, you need to
Yeah.
stop hero worship. You need to
Yep.
stop the concept of 10x engineer. You need to stop the uh, no. So the 10x
No, no, no.
engineer in the
No, not that part.
2021 cultural
I
context.
didn't shrug
Uh,
on that part. Like,
but
yeah. Go
you
on.
need to then empower. It's kind of a it's how test driven development, the mindset that you stop, don't get into writing code, you first write the test to validate. If you abstract that out, you kind of get this thing that whenever a new project is being built, the first thing you want to figure out is how does this survive if its current drivers uh, are not there. Which means the task of an organization, of an organized action, then becomes the task of ensuring that nutrition reaches that objective in the form of resources, in the form of people. So, what it means, the reason I said it will break anthropic boundaries, the moment to answer that question, is the answer to how do you create a entity that is not limited to the human frailty and fragility, or for any other species for that matter, is by completely disconnecting the you know disconnecting this ego that a creator usually is associated with in our daily world. I'm talking of a much more austere approach. I'm not saying anything else is compromised. I'm talking of austere almost to the point of ascetic, but not in those frameworks. I'm saying somebody like a set of people working, and in many cases, I'm kind of getting close to the federation.
The
In
analogy that helps me understand this is usually human body itself.
yeah,
Overall, there is an identity, the bigger identity, but my cells are not running away with, hey, mine. I don't want, like, I want extreme individuality all by myself. I am not gonna share that. I'm not gonna work towards the bigger
absolutely.
goal. They all are trying to share or work towards the bigger goal in different ways. And the reason when you said the 10x, and I like, it's not about 10x part. It's part about there are hyper contributors, there are like hyper contributors, but the point, like, would you put the neurons and the skin cells on the same plate, as in of effectiveness? The point is, but
Okay,
it's
in
not that
terms
you,
of tissues,
yeah,
everybody being tissues.
everybody. So my point is not that doesn't mean one has more value than the, as in one has value and other one doesn't have value. It's about, if you have a neuron and this that's doing the thinking part, it's doing the right work, that a skin cell and it's protecting you, it's doing the right job for its purpose, and that thing is associated, all of those things together working towards a bigger system, bigger than any of those things. Doesn't matter it's a 10x developer or a 100x developer, the system that it is working on, it's still out of the depth and it alone cannot handle it. Like, that is the part of the ego dissolution that actually I'm very much into. It doesn't really matter how much of a big fish you are, you need to be in a pond where you alone cannot survive or do what you can do with being a part of that whole ecosystem, where that ecosystem is set up well enough, congruent enough to that, like, it transcends the parts of the system, the whole transcends the parts of the system. What do you call that? Emergence, right? So the emergent effect is, emergence is where the parts of the system are, so some of the parts of the system is bigger.
Some of the parts being greater than the whole,
I
or
completely
the whole
again.
being greater than the sum of the parts,
I
because
think,
they are
yeah,
two diametrically opposite concepts. So the whole being greater than the sum of the parts is what you're
yes,
talking of.
yes, that's what I'm talking
If
about.
that is emergence, then that is, you said emergent something. I don't know what that is, like in which context,
That,
but
is that different from the concept of emergence that you understand?
I don't associate a concept of emergence in this form. It's probably
Okay.
some specific thing that I don't know, but I can
Emergence
understand
is,
the I can appreciate the direction, but that is exactly what I'm saying. And I also
yep.
like this kind of reinforces certain choices, like again, because we said we're going to talk more about tech, right? uh, this is what I meant by the intersectionality. You cannot just follow along one straight road.
So this is from
Oh,
Google search. This is from Google search. Directly, I just search for emergence, and it's said that, where the parts, basically the parts that build a whole, the whole has a property that the parts individually do not have anymore. So
yeah.
basically,
This I'm very familiar with.
yeah.
So yeah, what I was describing is this effect.
Okay.
So if we yeah, I should have taken systems theory route earlier when I was talking. So basically, whatever I said around organizing, around building these things, you need to evaluate them from a systems theory lens to understand what I'm talking of, where the boundaries
It's
lie,
much easier for me to
right?
understand that way.
Yeah. So just know that I am charting these, but from that have been
I
analyzed
see.
through a systems theory lens. And that is how I would refrain from disrupting the government. Because a systems theory view holds that you can tweak the conditions. And if you realize all I said, that I want to see what if I tweak the conditions. So that's why I mean that you can interpret all of this in the systems theory lens and it will
Hmm.
fit in.
Hmm.
So then where does that leave us? Um, there are certain micro decisions, like you said, here and there, which we try to, when we build systems, build organizations, we try to just emulate or copy from others because they have succeeded. And we have. But now that I understand better, I think it has also shifted how I look at technology, how I build software. Today, when I step into a new project and I see that it is meant to, I'm talking of your standard web application. It is meant to work with one payment gateway. It is meant to work with one email service, because the team who built it had less time on their hands, so they only had time to integrate, work with one. They're like, you decide, I'm going to integrate with this payment gateway, this database, and so on. And I like to ask what if questions there and see them fumble, because I know the answer of how, what I'm saying. And the simplest mind shift, if I have to bring it down to a maxim, is that nothing exists as one. At its simplest, it's a set of one.
Hmm.
Which
Got
means
it.
if you ever have to build a payment gateway integration into your web application, make sure there is a payment gateway functionality, and this provider is one of the set,
Hmm.
which is
The
adapters, which
amount
is
of resistance that I have faced trying to promote this exact concept is
so then I started selling this to executives, okay, to directors. In my last 5 6 years of career,
what's your success rate?
very high, uh, because there is a specific way to sell this,
Mm-hmm.
and it is market reach.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the market reach goes is, okay, let's say you have a um, let's say a B2B software, and you want to provide a one ring to rule them all kind of solution for a specific domain. So who would you be able to onboard?
Come again, the last part of the question, like before, like I have a
Let's take
wondering to go ahead.
you're building a all-in-one solution, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I called it a one ring to rule them all.
Everything app,
uh,
yeah,
yeah, sort of an everything app for a specific domain.
specific
So
domain.
let's
Okay,
say like healthcare, like hospital management,
right.
like customer support, like banking,
Mm-hmm.
like
Doesn't matter.
citizen
I
mobilization.
got that part. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But the point is, you're trying to build an all-in-one solution, and you are building an all-in-one solution because you are very confident that you can give an all-in-one solution, and your altruistic ideals are that then the people using this thing have access to a better system. They don't have to switch 10 different windows to get to everything. They have everything sorted in one place. My question to them is, how many customers do you get? What is your market size? And as it happens, the market size is either newcomers or long sales cycles with established companies,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to convince them, you have to do massive data migrations
Mm-hmm.
from all these places. So then where the story changes is, okay, ওই ছুঁচ হয়ে ঢুকে কি হয়ে বেরোনো,
ফাল হয়ে বেরোনো.
হ্যাঁ, ফাল হয়ে বেরোনো, that is the integration game, right? That then the thing I talk of is, okay, what if, let's say, your all-in-one solution covers all the needs, but your all-in-one solution also accommodates existing systems that have been set up. So you can then go to a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 1000 company and tell them that, hey, it looks like this part of your system, like for first discussion with them is, can you tell us how do you run your operations today? Identify what are the weak points, see the overlap, pitch them that upgrade. That if you use our, let's say, CRM, our mail delivery service, and so on, our shipment tracking, you'll get this part better. And then you go and slowly upsell. You give them, you have entered through a small route, you have integrated with existing systems, and you slowly take over the host body if
Mm.
they allow you,
Mm-hmm.
if it looks like you do in fact perform all of the functions.
Right.
So then what this means is, I have immediately expanded the market reach, saying that now it's not just newcomers or long sales cycles with Fortune 500. You can pretty much go to any organization in this domain, if you and you have a smaller sales cycle, because now all you need to know is how do they work and where can you augment it currently through your adaptable system. So then ask your architects and engineers to build adapters, that they want this system to play with existing systems to the farthest extent possible. And where existing systems don't play with this, you shame them. तुम्हारे पास API भी नहीं है. What will I integrate? You better come onto our system. You'll get APIs and all. Integrate with all other systems. So you can take a moral high ground. So basically, over the last 5, 6 years, this has worked, and it has worked in
If it
wildly
has
different ways.
worked, if it has worked, I congratulate you, and I also congratulate
Maybe I was
you.
lucky
Yeah,
in
you're
in a
lucky to
narrow
the point.
spectrum.
You have spoken to the person with a decent amount of um, cognitive balance
Well,
in them
truth
to
be
identify
told,
that.
no, I took a different route. Okay, and this is the honest. Yeah. I could never convince the. I mean, of course, I was not at a rank where somebody would listen to me in terms of a serious advice. So what I started doing is whatever project I was working on, I started implementing adapters, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I started demoing, and then somebody asks, "Oh, but you build this thing using Postgres. The people I have use like some hosted database."
Tell me which
Cool.
one.
Tell me which one. 2 days later, this
Yeah, I
system now
have it.
supports two things.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I see. I see. I see. No, that
So I
that
did a
makes
lot of show
sense.
and tell basically,
Right. No,
and I
that
did a
part
lot of shaming in the process.
doesn't matter. That part makes sense. That part, now that part I get and I appreciate. That works. That does work. In fact, that is the part that did work. So I was trying to understand what worked for you, and you are coming to the same conclusion that I did. No matter
I
how
did.
much explanation you
Need
want to
or you
explain,
need control. Like you
yeah,
need to be in a position of power.
I either you didn't need that ethos or you need a show and tell. Either of the cases, basically you need immediate sense of gratification that the other person can have in order to give the order that, hey, hunter घुमा के chalo, let's go. It does not work, however, to pose this as a logos based um, rhetoric. It does
No,
not. It
no.
fails miserably, and I'm kind of learning not to do that. I'm or
You know what's a
learning.
testament to that?
Yeah.
Me deciding to switch my career track. I like, okay, you know what? I will only work with people who understand this now.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
That's
So
the only way of doing
that's
this.
how I kind of now determine. Like I don't. So there was once a time when I used to feel like, ah, this guy is stupid. This guy is smart. Right? Nowadays I don't do that anymore because I understand that there is more dimensionality to this. But then again, I have my limited bandwidth to get a, so now I just find out the people who can meet me there where I my natural state is, but I will work with and take money from all the different kinds of people. I don't.
Right.
I'm
In
not
a world
Sharma. I'm omnivorous now on that rate.
in a world
Right.
where the total human population is under 10,000, my approach would have been drastically different. In fact, it would have been more of the show and tell, more of the influence. But as it happens, just the playing the numbers game,
Mm-hmm.
there are enough humans on this
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah.
If I
Exactly.
place a filter that takes a very small percentile, I will at least end up with a 50% team.
You will still get the Dunbar number again.
Yeah,
So you'll still get enough Dunbar number amount of humans along with
yeah.
you that you can find right at home. So I don't worry about that anymore. I think we both come to the same kind of conclusion.
I
Two
think
different
that was a
experiments, but
necessary understanding
to
for
have.
me to not feel alone in this world.
Agreed.
It was like, because there was a long stretch of my life where I felt that, this isolated creature in a sea of whatever,
I
this
may.
kind of makes me feel like, okay, I'm not alone. Wo wala, that feeling.
Yeah. I don't know how that manifested in you, but for me, it drove me nuts towards all sorts of like reading like psychology books and reading like
It has all
entire all
comes
these
to
things.
those.
Like
You
it
cannot
took
form
me a
these.
weird tangent.
Okay, see, if machine learning is a vague representation of how humans learn, then one of the main things, it needs more data, right? To become better and better at predicting.
Yep.
So same, no one can reach these ideas without having read and thought and absorbed and assimilated and processed and applied and done all of that. And that is how these filters operate. So I ask somebody to, so this is what I ask in engineering interviews now, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
My one go-to question, it used to be event-oriented systems. Now it is explain adapters to me.
Yep. What's the success scenarios like? How much success are you getting out of
I
this?
can
Or is
say
that is
with
it becoming one of the litmus
very,
tests that actually breaks
it's
this?
a litmus test.
Okay.
It's one of the first things I go into. In fact, I use that cliche of an interview thing that if it's a web developer, then explain everything that happens from when you enter a URL in your browser and you see the page load. And it's one of those graded answers, right? That somebody, yeah, and then I can drill deeper because I have got an icebreaker. That's my icebreaker question.
Mm-hmm.
Then wherever somebody shows more, like one person had gone to the level of DNS records, if somebody goes there, then I dig deeper into DNS. I want to see where does it bottom out,
Yeah, that's
starting from a
exactly
simple
what you
concept,
can
right?
do. But
But with an adapter, it's the
mm,
other way around.
mm,
It's that I don't want to see where you bottom out. I
mm,
want to see how far deep have you begun
mm,
and you have come here.
mm.
So, and with adapters, you get everything from a textbook answer because there are many forms, and you kind of, I can't tell you how many engineers have explained to me the hexagonal design pattern when I ask them adapters. And it's got to do with a bunch of things. But
It's fine.
basically, when I ask about adapters, uh, interviews either talk about the hexagonal architecture as an adapter, they talk of microservices as
Mm-hmm.
an adapter, they talk of gaming mods. In fact, those are the ones who impress me the most. They talk of gaming mods as
You know that that
adapters.
answer is not canned answer.
Huh?
You know that
Yeah,
this
yeah,
answer is not canned answer. This person is
yeah.
thinking. The brain's
This
wheels are
person is
turning.
thinking.
Yeah,
And I have huge respect, not necessarily for those who have answered these
correctly.
correctly,
But
but I see people, younger minds especially, or even experienced older minds who have not been exposed to this, whether they grok the concept. So I'm not looking at a technical, sorry, I'm of course looking at a technically correct answer, but it's not my only criteria. I want to see them grok this concept at its core, that it's, if things are not one, it's a set of one.
mhm.
How close does someone get to that maximum, or can they tell me even a better, a more simpler formulation of this concept?
At the end of the day, if you can just create any test that first establishes the concept of abstraction, how much layers of abstraction
Yes.
that they can get, then the entire difference between whether it's a one or set of one is also an abstraction. And that's an willing, like somebody making a willing choice to build that abstraction. A person who
Yeah,
is,
and I don't like having programming questions in my
no, no, I'm not
interviews.
talking about
I
programming
don't
question.
like.
I'm talking about generic concept of abstraction in thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, uh, anyways, I'm not saying that what you're doing is not right. Like, the concept of abstraction, concept of state, and concept of complexity. Those three things, like you can like literally go into and form thousands of questions around that. Those three things basically break open the game for me, right? Uh,
Yep.
Either people fall flat or you immediately see them they have the right answer. If they have the right answer, then I don't bother them too much on that part. I move on to the next one, right? But if I see them somebody struggling with it but they are trying to come up with something, I see that then that is probably the best way to identify
So
somebody.
it's kind of giving you a trifecta that you can draw sort of a heat map around
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
like chart
yeah. Uh,
the potential
yeah, what's the
of how you
filter,
see.
that this guy looks at the world at, right? And where can he meet me? And sometimes like the results are fantastic, but it has happened multiple times that those people are really hard to hire unless
Yeah,
like you offered them and they're like, oh no, there are multiple different reasons that this doesn't work out. I really don't know how to reconcile with that. It feels bad to reach out to them and say that, hey, I had a really nice chat with you, let's connect on LinkedIn or something like that. Even partially the reason being I don't even use LinkedIn, so this is more of an ornamental thing than anything else. But I just don't know how to retain that connection or the thing, because sometimes I do have like massive appreciation for some of the people that come up and we don't end up hiring them. We do end up hiring them pretty good people, but a lot of the time we don't, and that kind of bothers me a little bit. I don't really know how to.
but that's the thing that will happen in any org, right? That I mean, hiring, it's a matter of literally the Kundalini's meeting.
I am not really big fond of the way traditional hiring mechanism works.
I know, I
I
know. But all I'm saying that why I brought that up
Yeah.
is it's also about how I evaluate and look at people, because I can't read facial expressions and understand a person's gesture. I don't pick on body languages that good. So it's very easy for somebody to
Fake that out.
if I were to, yeah, to fake that and kind of make it look something like that. But and also, I know that I am not the best programmer around. I have always had that humility. But I also, I think I've told this before, that
You are
I know
pretty
that I'm a
good.
reasonably
I,
I'm a
I, I,
reasonably good problem solver.
you're pretty good problem solver. You're also pretty good programmer. I still go back and look at the codes that you have written before.
Thank you. uh, m-
S- s-
what I'm trying to say is that
to get me away from the codes that I see on a daily basis.
that's a huge compliment. Thank you. uh, so yeah, what I'm trying to say is that I have come to realize that I don't need to know how good a programmer somebody is. Because what I mean by when I say programmer is how good can they wield a programming language, how much do they know, how much have they worked, how deep do they know that language, and so on.
All that is
It's
secondary.
like hiring a linguist, na?
Mhm.
You don't, like, if I was hiring a linguist, let's say, what would I look at? I don't need to look at how many languages they know, how much. I don't need to look at numbers in terms of facts. I need to look at how did they learn that many language. How much of those do they hold the skill to actually use in daily usage? How many of those can this? I mean, first that humility, right? That how many of those can they slow down? So those are all peripheral discussions for me. The key thing that I want to get out of these interviews is really that part, that where do we meet?
Mhm.
And I enter into it with this conviction that we both have to do some things to meet. I'm not expecting that other person to come and fit.
Mhm.
I'm expecting change to
Mhm.
happen because I am working with somebody else,
Do some.
which
Yeah.
means
Yeah. Go
that
ahead.
the org in this case has to be that malleable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's inevitable,
Absolutely.
especially for senior hires.
Yeah. Lucky. Yeah. I absolutely agree. And luckily for my experience as well, the current one, it kind of fits that, like the malleability, the adaptability, as well as seeing new talent as an infusion that enriches us than a factor that can potentially harm us, essentially, like, or the culturally
Yeah,
deteriorate, etc. So
yeah.
identifying how do you enrich us is what we're looking at. So yeah, I think having that
And
right mindset.
well, on the part that I don't like traditional hiring is because I have been a victim of it
Yeah.
all my career. Even while like switching from my last job, I started looking for engineering manager roles. And by then, my designation in my current job was engineering manager.
Mm-hmm.
And a week of search and a bunch of rejections, automated or manual, told me that because I don't have a background in building this certain kind of software for the last 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
I am not considered for that role. And I was glad they rejected me.
Yeah, you don't want to go through that kind of mindset, that kind of like cesspool in the first place. It took us a long time to reorient the HR team on those regards as well. Now they're finding much better candidates and finding in a much better way than they traditionally are trained to do. Again, the same thing that boils down to when they studied how the industry worked and what are the things that were norms, massively breaks down. People don't, like, if I would say as a planner myself, if you're planning for 5 years, making a terrible mistake in some areas. Like if you're making solid plans for say 5 years, so what's your plan for 5 years, and you want a solid kind of answer, your expectations are wrong. If the person is answering and you're not calling you out on your stupidity, they're answering it wrong in both those cases. And if you're expecting somebody to do the same thing over the last 5 years and continue to do the same thing in your organization for another couple of years that you are expecting him to work on, your expectations are unfounded and against the demand of the time. I think those HRs would find themselves in organizations that are starting to fail. Part of the reason being the hiring process themselves.
Yep. I think the hiring process is one of those things which I had initially shied myself away from, thinking that it's not my job.
No, then I
Yeah,
figured
like
out it is my
then I
job.
figured it is my job, that it is definitely affecting. my day in day outs, I better
Yep.
have a say in it.
Yes.
That's how I came into it.
That's the
But then
exact way. Yeah. Go
you
ahead.
look at the pattern. The reason I have reasonable confidence in us, a newfound confidence, so to say, is that it seems like we need to set goals. I mean, we were talking about this last session. Huh? If
Yep.
we identify this is worth doing, no matter which route, it might be conventional, non-conventional, we take to reach there, by the time we reach a certain maturity, it's almost always better than the status quo.
Yep.
And this is, I think, a brag that we don't do often. That, uh, but it happens. So then I went back thinking that why does it happen? And at least for me, the answer seems to be it was not always so. It has gotten incrementally better, sort of a cumulative effect of past actions that drives cumulatively exponential change. And where this led me to is basically I have become better at articulating or converting my thoughts into processes, protocols, and testable hypotheses, and actually testing, as opposed to just keeping it in my head thinking that everybody will think it is stupid. So I have learned to articulate not just verbally, a multi I mean,
Faceted.
sort of a polyglot way, right,
Mm.
of looking at language,
Right.
that the same concepts can be explained in protocols, which means at some point I gained this ability to explain the same concept to peoples of different ages, different roles, different disciplines, and I would be able to tailor it to their needs.
Yep.
Initially, it began instinctively till
Mm.
I analyzed what was happening, and the answer was I was being a very good listener. I was actually observing, I was taking in, figuring out the diff from my understanding, figuring out the relevance, then doing that. So I'm just basically productized, or not productized, protocolized, well, made my thoughts into a protocol such that I can follow when I'm not at my peak efficiency. And that changed the game, because earlier I used to be only functional or productive when I was at my peak efficiency. Periods of depression, periods of dissociation would just derail anything that I have done. And you have seen that in action. So my coping mechanism has now become those few very well identified strategies of functionality, which I have ingrained in a way that I don't need to cross question, rethink those. So essentially living by maxims that actually tide you over this periods of low productivity, to the point that you stop looking at productivity as a metric altogether.
Yep. Results would speak for itself. It's not about whether you had a very productive afternoon if it doesn't result in a very productive to 2023, or
So
rather the much bigger picture than that. Yeah, go ahead.
I have been dabbling in music for a while,
Mm.
like since I was 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
I was of course interested in singing music as a kid, but I was told ওগুলো মেয়েদের জিনিস, আহ, তুমি করতে পারবে না, তুমি গান গাইতে পারবে না, নাচতে তো ডেফিনেটলি পারবে না. And I accepted, of course. You at that age you don't have that. So just a contrast in our upbringings, basically, that I can't say if this is for everybody, but I was told that. But then what happened was that stayed in, and my association with music was kind of tainted, because by the time I was 13, 14, post puberty, voice croaked, I was no longer that efficient singer. Now I hear the notes, but I can't sing them out without practice, because the entire machinery has changed. And because I have not learned, I now thought that okay, হয়ে গেছে, এই জন্মে আর হবে না. There is no more for me to know music, nothing. But
I
then
like
I
that.
kept coming back at it. No?
Yeah.
At the age of 18-ish, I tried to get back to guitar, failed. Uh, Failed, why the reasons are multivariate. But let's just say I could not pursue it. Then I took to I think I tried guitar 3, 4 times between like ages 16 to 25, 26. Then 27, 28, I decided, hey, guitar কাজ করছে না, অন্য কিছু চালাবো.
Mm.
What else can happen? And I took the decision based on what do I do when I listen to a music. And turns out what I do is I don't hum. When I listen to a song, I am always taken to its beat. I am
Tempo,
always taken to its tempo, to its rhythm, to its beat signature. And turns out I have a very intuitive understanding. So then I took a
bass.
bass,
Yep.
I got me a cajon.
Yeah.
I eventually bought a set of drums, but then I didn't have time to play and eventually gave it away. Bass, I faced that same kind of issue as I had on guitar, and then I realized I have nerve issues which prevent me from effectively doing it. And I was like, you know what, maybe not the first thing I want to do. I first want to get good at some parts of it that I can do with what I have. Then I'll augment and get to what I wish to get to. So over the last year also, so then cajon continued. I practiced, I played in when I was in postman with colleagues and so on. um, but then over the last year or so, I started getting a bit serious about this. Well, it's not a year anymore, it's like a year and a half. You can realize the timeline
Yeah, yeah,
of what
kind
changed
of.
in
Yeah,
my
yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
I was like, it seems like I understand rhythms, tempos very naturally. So why not look at, because I had thought classical music was this extremely difficult thing, why not look at just the rhythm section of classical
Which is
musics?
not the difficult thing, by the way, in the Indian classical at least.
And I realized I have landed on a gold mine.
Yep.
It's
Okay.
a pedagogical gold mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because the very complex rhythms have very simple combinatorial logic to it. And the
Yes.
moment I understood combinatorial logic, I
Logic.
like, yeah, bro, we're talking now.
Exactly, that's the reason why the if you look in your head, like what does the ideal bassist look like, what does the ideal drummer looks like versus what ideal vocalist and ideal guitarist looks like or ideal flutist looks like, those are different. There are some certain difference, right? You probably
Hmm,
cannot put it in words.
hmm,
I can somewhat put it in words, but that is what plays a role. The people who are trying to break down a complex system into a manageable small chunks which carries the weight for the rest of the music to go along with. You can think of it as the train tracks. Again,
hmm.
building out the system from like the from the ground as a train tracks that carries the train as a whole. If
Yeah.
that's not the thing, then what else is best? Like what is the tempo of the music, right? I think
Are you familiar with Konakol?
somewhat like I have heard of it. I'm not like
Konakol
from
is
not from a
the
grammatical way.
it's the logic slash the script behind Mridangam.
Okay, yes. So I've heard that thing like when they
Yeah.
the
Now,
dance and
what I realized where the click happened is that I could understand music in numbers, and numbers came to me intuitively. Numbers. So when I think numbers, I'm not thinking three numbers. For me, I think numbers in shapes
oh, okay, okay,
in my head.
okay. Visual.
And
You're very visual.
I'm very visual
I
with
see.
numbers, which means I am, and this has always been the case, which was the main reason people thought I was intelligent as a kid. Is I had my way around numbers because I could understand quantities and all very well. So for once, now you see where those sensory transitions happened, transfers happened. I at this point have forgotten why I came to this, but this is a good direction, so I'm continuing.
Okay.
Uh, you can stop the stream if this is irrelevant for
No,
the
it's
audience.
okay. It's okay. I might start speaking gibberish because my like speech processing is kind of going out of
That's
order.
fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
Because it's been 3 hours.
almost yes.
Oh fuck. Okay. So anyway, Konakol. When I landed on it, I realized that while the North Indian classical tabla tradition has, or not Indian, the Hindustani tradition as we call it today, has its roots in many other areas. I'm not going to go into that. It has a more complex, it has a different kind of approach. Konakol has a very similar approach, but some very interesting parts to it, like the way tals are built in the in all these traditions, which are just beat sequences, right? Now, then how it becomes mathematical is beat sequences then are numbers. So let's say 8 as a beat sequence would mean it would have 8 quarter notes or 8 full notes, however whichever tradition you play it. Now, each note being one full syllable. You can break each of them down into as many divisions as you want. And then this simple combination. For beginners, let's say the note ta. So you have syllables. So ta is one, taka is two, takita is three, some very basic things. So then you can then go on ta taka takita, ta taka takita, ta taka takita. That's six. Takita takita taka is eight. In my head, what I'm doing in my head is I'm planting 332.
Click on that link.
It should be the same. I mean, this is very basic that I'm saying. Um, okay.
Do you see that? Like, has it loaded for you?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, basically,
You can draw on that,
this
by the
is
way.
this is beginners level stuff
Yeah,
for
it's beginner's
how
level. But the
far
point
I
is,
have.
you can draw on that and create. Yeah,
So
go on.
then, what I realized was, okay, the compositions,
Hmm.
the rhythms, the tal that they come in with, basically are a way of looking at space time, not just time.
Yes, correct.
And some of those connections suddenly opened this set of, I don't know, neurons or not, that now when I'm playing the cajon, you sit and you play, it's a box like thing. So when I'm playing on it, I know at that very moment when I have missed, or I know when even scarier, I know which bit I will miss. I can predict with that within that split second. I know I'm going to miss, and I know I'm going to miss because I have not drawn the internal representation of the next sequence in my head and I'm winging it. Whenever I wing it, I miss it.
Mm-hmm.
But because the protocols have become so intuitive, they map to this intuitive concept that playing them back, it's now become an enjoyment. It's no longer that stiffening of things anymore. And suddenly it is that smooth. This is reinforcement learning.
I know. Okay, I'm really glad that you found that as one of the outlet that helps you really much, because I do think, and this is a
It's
prediction,
not
by
an
the way.
outlet. It's not an outlet yet. Okay.
Okay,
Right now, it's just the knowledge
yeah.
that I can take on something that I was so afraid and I can
That's
break it down in very
exactly,
different
that's the point I
ways.
was getting to. That's all it takes for you to start journeying, like going on a new
Yeah.
track that you haven't ever went on. I
And
can
this was way, way outside my comfort zone.
exactly. You are not a sports person. You haven't taken sports. You hated physical activity, things that were physical in nature, as in you have to do this. So you probably thought that the people who press tabla and like, why are you doing the same thing over and over? Yeah, isn't that stupid? Aren't your hands tired? Like,
I was very fond of them.
were you? Okay.
In fact,
Anyways, I'm just projecting
repetitive
out.
beats used to get me.
Oh, okay. I see. The point is, if you start like that, is one of the from this socionics perspective, one of the cognitive function of one of the eight cognitive functions that you have is your blind spot. For you, also my father, also for Mo, that's called SE. That is extroverted sensing. Basically, make your body work. The exact opposite would be the gymnasts, or the like people who are good with their body, who will get on the dance floor and dance in a moment's notice, like just because they can, right? Complete. You have that as your blind spot, not because you cannot do it. It's something that is not your go-to mechanism, because you use. So there are two ways of consuming information, in a sense. One is the extroverted sensing. One is the extroverted intuition. The extroverted intuition is more cognitive of a process, and that is your go-to. So you run through ideas that a runny brain that has, right? You understand the concept of running brain, right? Chaotic, like producing ideas like fountain, and it is natural to you because that is your go-to. The other the how do you say, like, the alternative weapon that you could use, that you don't use because you always run to that one weapon that you have, is the SE for you, that you haven't used it before. You never thought of it that way, and it remained that childish, kiddish manner in that state. You grew up, all the other things grow up, right? But that remained there. you found that out in the attic. Oh wow, I haven't done anything with it, and I'm starting to take that baby step, and this is amusing. That is fantastic. That happened to me because uh, my blind spot is FE, so that is extroverted feeling. So basically, understanding. I still routinely make mistakes on that, by the way, and I do realize that exact same way. That way that when you said EU, that uncle thingy, and I went on a different tangent. I realized it. I caught back. But the point is, I wouldn't have realized it before at all. Like I am doing something and you are uncomfortable with that situation. I wouldn't have understood it at all. I bulldozed it and went afar. So for me, when I get to understand somebody, listen to somebody, even at a baby level, like I'm not good at that. Probably would take me a long time before I do anything of that sort. But whenever I find I took a baby step, it's immediately amusing to me that wow, I did. I like somebody give me a pat on the back. This is amusing, and I understand that from that perspective. I understand why you are amused about it, and I'll root for you. Go ahead, do that. Sometimes make me listen. Like yeah,
Cool. I think we should wrap up, otherwise this will go overnight.
yeah. Let's do that. Okay. I know that I made probably did not make enough sense in the last few minutes because
No, no, it did to me.
I see. I don't know what I'm talking about. Frankly speaking, my brain kind of have checked out in a sense. The part that I
I'll.
realized the part that I realized is that we never run out of topics to discuss. That was the part that I wanted to kind of check. Like, what happens if we move out of the things that we can keep talking for a long period of time, go into completely different, like policy making, governance, tech, etc. We didn't even cover the part of the tech fully. We kind of the seed grows. We go on a branch and go on that tangent. We kind of forget the what are the other things are, right? The part
But have we really forgotten?
we haven't. That topic will come up again, and we'll like we remember we started talking about this. Okay, that branch goes there. Point is, we always have enough things to talk about. Always. Next week is basically. Do you want to do it on a Monday, Saturday, or Sunday? Which is better for you?
Why don't we close the stream and then discuss this?
Good job. Okay.